Hello friends. Welcome to the DXD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was betrayed and become the strongest Saiyan warrior, DBZ. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Betrayal's Awakening. The crimson sunrise filtered through the half-drawn curtains of Issei Hyodo's bedroom, painting elongated shadows across his sleeping form. His chest rose and fell in an erratic rhythm, sweat beading along his forehead despite the cool morning breeze. Behind closed eyelids, his eyes darted frantically, caught in the grip of the same recurring dream that had haunted him for weeks. Flames. Endless flames engulfing a red sky. The acrid taste of ash. A woman's cream piercing through the cacophony of destruction. A spacecraft launching into darkness. Then, nothing but stars and silence. Issei bolted upright, gasping for air as if he'd been drowning. The sheets clung to his damp skin as he ran trembling fingers through his disheveled brown hair. Something felt wrong. Different, like his own body had become foreign territory overnight. Third time this week, he muttered, glancing at his alarm clock. The digital display read 5:17 a.m., nearly 2 hours before he needed to be awake for school. A sharp pain lanced through his abdomen, doubling him over. He stumbled to the bathroom, bracing himself against the sink as he stared into the mirror. The reflection that greeted him seemed subtly altered, his jawline more defined, his shoulders broader than they had been just days ago. Most disconcerting were his eyes. For just a moment, he could have sworn they flashed with an unnatural teal hue before returning to their normal brown. What's happening to me? The question lingered unanswered as he splashed cold water on his face. The sacred gear within him, the boosted gear, had been unusually quiet lately. Normally, Didraig would have some sarcastic comment about his partner's weakness. But the ancient dragon spirit had grown increasingly silent as Issei's strange symptoms progressed. Flexing his fingers experimentally, Issei felt an unfamiliar surge of energy coursing through his veins, raw power that felt fundamentally different from the demonic energy he'd grown accustomed to since becoming a devil in Rias Grimori's peerage. He placed a hand against the bathroom wall to steady himself, and watched in stunned silence as the tiles cracked beneath his fingertips. What the hell? He yanked his hand away, staring at his palm with wide eyes. Nothing looked different, yet something had clearly changed. Something beyond his sacred gear, beyond his devil physiology. Something primal and instinctual that called to him like a forgotten memory. The distant chime of his phone interrupted his thoughts. A message from Rias. Emergency meeting. Occult Research Club. 6 a.m. Issei frowned. Emergency meetings weren't uncommon, but the timing felt ominous given his current state. Still, he couldn't ignore a summons from his king, the woman who had resurrected him, given him purpose, and, at least in his mind, stolen his heart. 30 minutes later, Issei approached the old school building that housed the Occult Research Club. The early morning silence felt heavy, almost oppressive. Birds that should have been singing their dawn chorus remained eerily quiet. Even the usual ambient sounds of the awakening town seemed muted, as if the world itself were holding its breath. As he climbed the stairs to the clubroom, each footfall echoed with unnatural loudness. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, an instinct he'd learned to trust during his relatively short time in the supernatural world. Something's not right, he whispered, pausing outside the ornate wooden doors of the clubroom. From within, he could sense the presence of the entire peerage, Rias, Akeno, Kiba, Kaneko, Asia, and even Gasper. Their familiar energy signatures should have been comforting. Yet something in their collective aura felt altered, foreign. Steeling himself, Issei knocked once before pushing the door open. The clubroom had been transformed. The familiar Victorian furniture had been pushed against the walls, creating an open space in the center where an intricate magic circle glowed with pulsing crimson light. Candles burning with black flames surrounded the perimeter, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to move with minds of their own. But it was the expressions on his friends' faces that chilled Issei to the bone. Clinic. Detachment where there should have been warmth. Calculation where there should have been compassion. Issei. Rias's voice carried none of its usual affection. She stood at the head of the circle, resplendent in ceremonial robes of deepest crimson embroidered with the Grimori family crest. Her fiery red hair cascaded down her back, seeming to absorb rather than reflect the candlelight. "You're right on time, Bushu. What's going on?" Issei remained in the doorway, instinct screaming at him to retreat even as loyalty compelled him forward. "What kind of emergency is this? The kind that concerns your future with us." Akino stepped forward, her usual playful demeanor replaced by something cold and assessing. Her traditional Miko attire rustled softly as she moved to stand beside Rias. "We've noticed changes in you, Issei-kun." Kiba closed the door behind Issei with a decisive click. The blonde knight's perpetual smile was absent, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that bordered on disgust. "Changes that require immediate attention," he added, placing a firm hand on Issei's shoulder to guide him toward the circle. Kaneko, diminutive as always, observed from the corner, amber eyes reflecting the candlelight like a predator's. "Your scent has changed," she stated flatly. "You're not what you were." Only Asia showed any sign of distress, her green eyes brimming wit. Chun shed tears as she clutched her healing sacred gear to her chest. "I'm sorry, Issei-san," she whispered, voice barely audible. "They said this is for the best." "For the best?" Issei's confusion idly transformed into alarm as Kiba's grip tightened painfully on his shoulder. "What exactly are you planning to do?" Rias approached, her movements fluid and purposeful. Up close, Issei could see something unfamiliar in her aquamarine eyes, a hunger that transcended mere ambition. "Your power has been evolving, Issei. Not just the boosted gear, but something else. Something ancient that's awakening inside you." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Something that could elevate the House of Grimoire beyond all others, if properly harvested." The word, harvested, sent a chill down Issei's spine. He attempted to step back, only to find himself immobilized, caught in a binding spell that Akino had silently cast while Rias spoke. "Bushu, please," he pleaded, struggling against the invisible restraints. "Whatever's happening to me, we can figure it out together. Isn't that what we do? Aren't we family?" For a fleeting moment, something like regret flickered across Rias's features. Then her expression hardened once more. "Family serves family, Issei. The power growing within you doesn't belong to just you, it belongs to the Grimoire peerage. To me." She placed a cold hand against his cheek. "And I intend to claim it." With a gesture from Rias, Kiba and Akino forced Issei into the center of the circle. The moment his feet touched the glowing sigils, pain erupted throughout his body, white-hot agony that surpassed anything he'd experienced in battle. The magic circle activated fully, binding him in place with chains of pure energy that seared his flesh wherever they touched. "Begin the extraction," Rias commanded. Stepping back to the edge of the circle, Akino raised her hands, lightning crackling between her fingertips. "This will hurt," she stated without her usual sadistic pleasure. This wasn't about enjoyment. This was clinical, calculated. "Try not to resist. It will only make it worse." The lightning struck Issei's chest directly over his heart, driving a scream from his lungs that echoed through the clubroom. He felt something being pulled from deep within him, not the familiar presence of Diedre, but something even more fundamental to his being. "Interesting," came Rias's voice through the haze of pain. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our records. Neither demonic nor angelic, not even draconic despite the boosted gear's influence." Through tear-blurred vision, Issei watched as tendrils of golden energy began to flow from his body into crystalline receptacles positioned around the circle. Each extraction brought fresh waves of agony and, more alarmingly, a profound sense of emptiness, as if pieces of his very soul were being torn away. "Bushu, please stop," Asia sobbed from the sidelines. "You're killing him." "He won't die," Rias replied coolly. "Not with your sacred gear to heal him between extractions. We need him alive for the complete harvest." The clinical detachment in her voice struck deeper than the physical pain. This was Rias, his king, his savior. The woman he'd pledged to serve and protect. The woman he loved, now regarding him as nothing more than a resource to be mined for power. Within the maelstrom of agony and betrayal, something snapped inside Issei. Not his will, something far more primal. A genetic lock, hidden in the deepest recesses of his DNA, breaking open under extreme duress. The dreams suddenly made sense. The visions of a dying world. The spacecraft. The changes to his body. all of it rushing together in a moment of terrible clarity. Deep within his mindscape, a new voice spoke, not Dedrag's familiar rumble, but something fiercer, more primal. Remember who you are, child of Vegeta. Remember the pride of the Saiyan race. The pain abruptly transmuted into something else, raw, unbridled power surging through every cell. Issei's scream transformed into a roar that shook the foundations of the building. The binding spell shattered like glass. The extraction circle cracked, its airfully drawn sigils warping under the pressure of an energy it was never designed to contain. What's happening? Kiba shouted, drawing his sword as the floor beneath them began to tremble. Akeno attempted to reinforce the binding spell, only to be thrown backward by a shockwave of pure energy emanating from Issei's convulsing form. Impossible, Rias whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. No devil should be able to break that seal. Quote, he's not just a devil anymore, Kaneko stated, backing toward the exit. That power, it's not from our world. In the center of the ruined circle, Issei floated several inches above the ground, surrounded by a golden aura that pulsed like a heartbeat. His hair, normally brown, flashed between its natural color and a brilliant gold. His eyes, when they opened, burned teal with unleashed fury. His voice had changed, resonating with power that made the windows vibrate in their frames. You were my friends, my family, I trusted you. The transformation wasn't complete, flickering unstably as Issei's body struggled to adapt to the sudden awakening of his dormant Saiyan blood. But even this partial state generated enough power to make the air itself feel heavy with pressure. Rias, recovering her composure, raised a hand wreathed in destructive magic. Stand down, Issei. Whatever's happening to you, we can still help control it. You're still my servant. Issei's response was a bitter laugh that held no humor. Is that what you told yourself when you decided to rip the power out of me? That you were helping? He took a step forward, and the floor cracked beneath his foot. The restraint in his movement was evident, a predator holding back, conscious that a single misstep could destroy everything around him. I would have given you anything, he continued, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My power, my life, everything. All you had to do was ask. Kiba moved with supernatural speed, sword flashing as he attempted to incapacitate Issei. In a blur of movement too fast for even devil eyes to track, Issei caught the blade between two fingers, the metal melting where it contacted his golden aura. Not fast enough, friend, Issei said, before flicking his wrist and sending Kiba crashing through the wall into the adjacent room. Akeno unleashed a barrage of lightning, only for it to dissipate harmlessly against Issei's aura. Kaneko launched herself at him, small fists carrying the strength to shatter concrete, but found herself caught in midair, held at arm's length as effortlessly as one might hold a kitten. I don't want to hurt any of you, Issei stated, gently setting Kaneko down. Despite everything, he grimaced, clutching his chest as the golden aura flickered and dimmed. His partially transformed state was unstable, taxing a body not yet conditioned for such power. Sensing weakness, Rias unleashed her power of destruction, a deadly wave of annihilating energy that had disintegrated high-class devils with ease. Issei raised a hand instinctively, and to everyone's shock, the destructive energy parted around him like water around a stone. Enough. The single word carried such RCE that every window in the clubroom shattered simultaneously. The golden aura surrounding Issei pulsed outward in a concussive wave that sent the entire peerage flying backward. In the sudden silence that followed, Issei stood alone, breathing heavily as his transformation continued to fluctuate. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, signs that his body was reaching its limit in this new state. I'm leaving, he announced quietly. Don't try to follow me. Rias struggled to her feet, her perfect composure finally cracking to reveal genuine fear. Issei, wait, we need to understand what's happening to you. That power, it could change everything. It already has. Issei's eyes, flickering between brown and teal, fixed on her with a gaze that contained equal parts fury and heartbreak. Quote, you already changed everything when you decided I was a resource instead of a person. With strength he didn't know he possessed, Issei turned away from the people he'd considered family. Each step toward the shattered windows felt like moving through lead, his newly awakened power already receding, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Yet pride, A pride he hadn't known he possessed, kept him upright as he climbed onto the windowsill. Issei-san, please. Asia's tearful voice nearly broke his resolve. She alone had shown reluctance in the betrayal. Where will you go? He paused, looking back one last time at the devastated clubroom and the people who had both saved and betrayed him. To find out who I really am, he answered simply. Then, with the last remnants of his mysterious new power, he leapt from the window into the early morning air. The golden aura flickered once more around him as he fell, slowing his descent enough to land safely in the school courtyard below. The moment his feet touched the ground, the transformation released completely, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision as his body, overwhelmed by the strain of his partial transformation, began to shut down. As consciousness slipped away, Issei became vaguely aware of a figure approaching, tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and flowing white hair bound in a high ponytail. The stranger's staff tapped gently against the ground as they approached, emanating an aura of power that dwarfed even what Issei had momentarily wielded. Interesting, came a melodic, feminine voice. So it's true. Saiyan blood has found its way to this realm. The last thing Issei saw before darkness claimed him entirely was a pair of curious purple eyes studying him with ancient wisdom and calculation. Rest, young Saiyan, Vados murmured, kneeling gracefully beside his unconscious form. Your journey has only just begun. Consciousness returned to Issei in fragments, sensation first, then sound, finally sight. He lay on something soft, surrounded by an unfamiliar scent that reminded him of ozone and distant stars. A gentle humming filled the air, rhythmic and soothing like the pulse of a sleeping universe. When he finally opened his eyes, he found himself in a chamber unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls seemed to shift between solid matter and transparent energy, offering glimpses of swirling nebulae and distant galaxies. The ceiling arched impossibly high, adorned with constellations he didn't recognize. Beneath him was a simple pallet that conformed perfectly to his body, supporting him as if he were floating on air. You recover quickly, observed the same melodic voice he'd heard before losing consciousness. A trait of your Saiyan heritage, no doubt. Issei bolted upright, instantly regretting the sudden movement as pain lanced through his temples. The figure who had spoken stood at the far end of the chamber, her back to him as she manipulated glowing symbols that hovered in the air before her. Where am I? Issei demanded, his voice hoarse. And who are you? The figure turned, revealing the same elegant blue-skinned woman he'd glimpsed before passing out. Up close, her features were even more striking, refined and ageless, with eyes that held wisdom beyond mortal comprehension. She wore elaborate robes of deep purple and white, cinched at the waist with a red sash. The tall staff in her hand occasionally emitted pulses of soft light in rhythm with the chamber's humming. My name is Vados, she replied, approaching with measured steps. As for where you are, we exist temporarily between dimensions, in a pocket realm of my creation. A necessary precaution, given the rather spectacular nature of your awakening. Issei's memories came flooding back, the betrayal, the pain, the sudden surge of inexplicable power. He looked down at his hands, half expecting to still see the golden aura surrounding them. What happened to me? He asked quietly. What did I become back there? Vados tilted her head slightly, studying him with the clinical interest of a scientist observing a rare specimen. You began to transform into your birthright, though the process was incomplete. A Super Saiyan transformation, triggered by extreme emotional distress. Saiyan. The word felt strangely familiar on Issei's tongue, as if he'd known it all along but had forgotten until this moment. What's a Saiyan? A warrior race from a universe parallel to this one, Vados explained, conjuring a three-dimensional image in the air between them. The hologram depicted a planet orbiting a red sun. Planet Vegeta, homeworld of the Saiyans, at least until its destruction at the hands of Lord Frieza some 40 years ago. The hologram shifted, to show humanoid figures with remarkable physical similarities to humans, distinguished primarily by the brown tails extending from their lower backs. The Saiyans were renowned throughout their universe as the most formidable warrior race in existence, Vados continued. Naturally gifted fighters with the unique ability to grow stronger after each battle, particularly after recovering from near-fatal injuries. Something clicked in Issei's mind. That's why I've been getting stronger after each fight. I thought it was just the boosted gear's influence. Your sacred gear has certainly enhanced your natural abilities. Vados acknowledged with a slight nod. But the rapid physical changes you've experienced recently, increased muscle density, accelerated healing, heightened senses, these are your Saiyan genes finally expressing themselves. Issei struggled to process this information. He'd already adapted to the revelation that devils, angels, and various mythological beings existed. But to learn that he himself wasn't fully human, that he carried the blood of an alien warrior race from another universe entirely, it stretched the limits of credibility. If I'm part Saiyan, then one of my parents, he trailed off. Eyes widening in realization. Your mother, Vados confirmed. Though she herself likely never knew. The few Saiyan survivors of planet Vegeta's destruction were scattered across the multiverse. Some, like your grandmother, found their way to this dimension and integrated into human society, their origins forgotten over generations. The revelation hit Issei like a physical blow. His mother, his ordinary, loving, completely normal mother who worked as a hospital administrator, carried the blood of an extinct warrior race. Had she ever experienced the same strange symptoms he had? Had there been signs he'd missed his entire life? Why now? He asked, rising unsteadily to his feet. Why is this happening to me suddenly? Vados gestured toward his left arm, the arm that housed the boosted gear. Your sacred gear's awakening likely triggered a cascade effect. The dragon's power resonated with your dormant Saiyan blood, gradually activating genes that might have remained suppressed your entire life. The extreme emotional and physical stress you experienced during the extraction attempt simply accelerated the process. Issei clenched his fist, summoning the boosted gear into manifestation. The familiar red gauntlet materialized around his arm, its green gem pulsing with energy. Didrag, he called to the dragon spirit within. Did you know about this? After a moment's silence, the gem flashed as the dragon responded. I suspected something was unusual about your physiology, partner. Your body adapted to my power more readily than any previous host. But I had no knowledge of Saiyans or their capabilities until your transformation began. The Red Dragon Emperor and Saiyan blood, Vados mused, circling Issei with analytical interest. An unprecedented combination. No wonder those devils were so eager to harness your power. The reminder of the betrayal sent a surge of anger through Issei. The lights in the chamber flickered as his energy briefly spiked in response to his emotions. Fascinating, Vados commented, seemingly unperturbed by the display. Your power responds instinctively to your emotional state, even without conscious direction. A common trait among novice Saiyans, though most require extensive training to channel their abilities effectively. Training. Issei latched onto the word. You mean I could learn to control this power? To use it at will? A hint of amusement crossed Vados's refined features. That is precisely why I intervened, young Saiyan. Your uncontrolled awakening sent ripples across dimensional boundaries, ripples that attracted my attention. Left untrained, your power poses a danger not only to yourself but to the fabric of this reality. She tapped her staff once against the floor, and the chamber around them transformed. The walls became entirely transparent, revealing their true location, a floating platform suspended in what appeared to be empty space, surrounded by swirling cosmic energy and distant celestial bodies. I am offering you knowledge, Issei Hyodo. Knowledge of your heritage, your capabilities, and the proper techniques to harness the power awakening within you. Vados's expression became serious. But I must warn you, the path of a Saiyan warrior is arduous. The training will push you beyond your limits, repeatedly and without mercy. I looked out at the cosmic panorama surrounding them, then down at his hands that had briefly channeled enough power to repel a high-class devil's attack. Hands that had belonged to a person who no longer existed. The ordinary high school student, the loyal pawn of Rias Grimori, that Issei had died in the betrayal. Why? He asked finally, meeting Vados's gaze. Why would you help me? What do you gain from this? A mysterious smile played across Vados's lips. Let's just say I have a vested interest in maintaining certain balances across the multiverse. Your emergence represents both opportunity and threat. Which path you ultimately follow depends largely on your training. She extended her staff, holding it horizontally between them like an offered handshake. So, Issei Hyodo, Saint Saiyan of Saiyan blood in this dimension, do you accept my guidance? The decision should have been difficult. Rational thought demanded caution, skepticism, time for consideration. But something deeper than thought, something in Issei's newly awakened blood, recognized the significance of this moment. This was the crossroads that would define not just who he was, but what he would become. With steady hands and unwavering gaze, Issei grasped the offered staff. I accept. A pulse of energy traveled from the staff up Issei's arm, briefly illuminating the network of veins beneath his skin with golden light. Vados nodded in satisfaction. Then your true education begins now. She withdrew the staff, tapping it once more against the floor. First lesson. A Saiyan's power comes not from rage alone, but from necessity. The need to protect, to survive, to exceed limitations. The platform beneath them suddenly vanished, leaving Issei suspended in open space. Panic seized him for a brief moment before he realized he could still breathe, still move as if in normal gravity. This realm operates on different physical laws than your dimension, Vados explained, floating effortlessly nearby. Here, survival depends entirely on your ability to control your ki, your life energy. Ki, Issei repeated, struggling to maintain his position as he felt himself beginning to drift. As that DFF errant from the demonic power I've been using. Fundamentally, Vados confirmed, demonic power draws from external sources, contracts, sacrifices, dimensional energy. Ki comes from within, from the very essence of your being. It is the foundation of all Saiyan techniques. She demonstrated with a casual gesture, creating a sphere of pulsing energy above her palm. Unlike the crimson power of destruction that Rias wielded, Vados's ki was pristine white tinged with pale blue, perfectly controlled and self-contained. Your first task is simple. Prevent yourself from drifting into the void by manifesting your own ki to create stability. She floated several meters away, leaving Issei alone in the vastness. I suggest you learn quickly. The farther you drift, the harder it will be for me to retrieve you. Wait, Issei called, already feeling himself moving slowly but inexorably away from the central point. I don't know how to use ki. Yes, you do, Vados countered calmly. You've been using it instinctively since your awakening. Now you must learn to access it consciously. As Issei continued to drift, a distant memory surfaced, not his own, but something more primal. Knowledge encoded in his very DNA, passed down through generations of Saiyan warriors. The concept of ki wasn't entirely foreign. In many ways, it paralleled the internal energy manipulation he'd learned as a devil. Center yourself. Feel the energy in your core. Draw it outward, not through magical circuits, but through the cells themselves. Closing his eyes, Issei focused inward, past the boosted gear's familiar presence. Deeper into his own being. There, like a banked fire waiting to be stoked, he sensed it, raw, primal energy suffusing every cell. That's it, partner, came Didrake's voice from within. Different source, similar principle, pull it to the surface. Sweat beaded on Issei's forehead as he concentrated, coaxing the dormant energy forward. At first, nothing happened. Then, a tingling sensation spread from his center outward, reminiscent of but distinct from the power flow he experienced when activating the boosted gear. Don't just contain it, Vados instructed from a distance. Project it, externalize your will. With a final push of concentration, Issei felt something break free, not violently as during his transformation, but in a controlled release. A pale golden aura, much subtler than his previous transformation, enveloped his body. His drift immediately slowed, then stopped entirely. Excellent, Vados approved. Now, try to move. Direct your energy to propel yourself. Moving in space without solid ground to push against required a complete mental readjustment. Issei experimentally channeled his ki downward, resulting in an immediate upward movement, too fast. Sending him tumbling in an uncontrolled spin. Control, Vados reminded him. Precision over power. For the next hour, Issei practiced basic movement techniques, gradually gaining confidence in his ability to direct his ki. Each successful maneuver came more naturally than the last, as if his body were remembering skills it had always possessed rather than learning them anew. Enough, Vados finally declared, returning them to the solid platform with another tap of her staff. You've demonstrated adequate control for a beginner. Now we must address more fundamental matters. Issei landed somewhat unsteadily, his legs wobbling from the unfamiliar exertion. Despite the physical strain, he felt oddly exhilarated. Flying. Actual flight under his own power, not using devil WINGS, awakened something primal and joyful within him. That was, he began, searching for adequate words. Natural, Vados supplied. Flight is instinctive for Saiyans, once they learn to control their ki. Your race evolved on a planet with 10 times Earth's gravity. Your bodies are designed for battle in all environments. She gestured, and a simple meal materialized on a low table that hadn't been there moments before: fruits, bread, and meat of varieties Issei didn't recognize. Eat, she instructed. Saiyan metabolism requires substantial caloric intake, especially during training. Our hunger will increase proportionally as your power grows. Issei didn't need to be told twice. Now that food was before him, he realized he was ravenously hungry. He began devouring the offered meal, with an enthusiasm that would have embarrassed him under normal circumstances. Between mouthfuls, he asked, "What did you mean by more fundamental matters?" Vados observed his eating with clinical interest. Your immediate concerns are threefold. First, understanding and controlling your Saiyan abilities. Second, addressing the betrayal you've experienced and its implications for your future. Third, preparing for the consequences of your emergence. Consequences. Issei paused mid-bite. Your awakening has not gone unnoticed, Vados stated matter-of-factly. The combination of Saiyan P.O.R. and the Red Dragon Emperor's influence creates an energy signature that transcends dimensional boundaries. Even now, entities from multiple realms are taking interest. A chill ran down Issei's spine despite the warmth of his newly discovered ki. What kind of entities? Some benevolent, others less so. Vados created a holographic display showing multiple energy signatures converging toward a central point, presumably Earth. The supernatural factions of your world will certainly investigate such an anomaly. But more concerning are the extra-dimensional observers who might recognize Saiyan energy for what it is. Among the approaching signatures, one pulsed with particularly ominous energy, a power so vast it made even Vados's aura seem modest by comparison. As that, Issei began, "Lord Beerus, god of destruction from the universe where Saiyans originated," Vados confirmed. "His attention has not yet fully fixed upon you, but it will. The question is whether you'll be prepared when it does." The implications were staggering. Gods of destruction, multiple universes, interdimensional politics, all suddenly relevant to Issei's existence. And yet, amid these cosmic concerns, his thoughts kept returning to more immediate matters. "The Occult Research Club," he said quietly. "What will they do now? After what happened?" Vados's expression softened marginally. The furs. Real emotion she displayed beyond clinical interest. The young Grimori heiress is undoubtedly reassessing her approach. Your display of power would have made direct confrontation seem unadvisable. "They were my friends," Issei murmured, the pain of betrayal still fresh. "I would have done anything for them." For her, a sentiment Rias Grimori was clearly aware of and chose to exploit, Vados observed dispassionately. "The question now is not what they will do, but what you will do when your paths inevitably cross again." The question struck Issei with unexpected force. What would he do? The anger still burned, certainly. But beneath it lay something more complex than simple desire for revenge. Disappointment, grief, and, most surprising of all, a strange sense of freedom. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Part of me wants to show them exactly what they tried to take. But another part wishes to understand why." Vados finished for him. A natural response. "However, I would caution against seeking such closure prematurely. Your control over your new abilities remains tenuous at best. A confrontation now would likely result in unintended casualties." The thought of accidentally harming someone, even those who had betrayed him, sent a wave of nausea through Issei. For all the power now awakening within him, he remained fundamentally the same person, someone who fought to protect, not to destroy. "How long will the training take?" he asked, refocusing on the immediate challenge. "How long until I can control this power fully?" Vados raised an elegant eyebrow. "That depends entirely on you. Saiyan potential is theoretically limitless, but practical mastery could take months or years. The question is whether we have that luxury. She gestured toward the holographic display, where the ominous energy signatures continued their approach. Time flows differently in this pocket dimension, approximately 10 times slower than in your world. Even so, we have perhaps 3 months of relative time before external factors force our hand. 3 months, Issei repeated, trying to grasp the timeline. And in that time, I need to master abilities I didn't even know existed until today. Not just master them, Vados corrected. You must surpass them. The conventional limits of Saiyan power may not be sufficient for what lies ahead. Something in her too. Nay made Issei suspect she knew more than she was revealing. Why me? He asked directly. Out of all the possible Saiyan descendants across dimensions, why focus on training me specifically? Vados studied him for a long moment, her ancient eyes unreadable. Because you, Issei Hyodo, represent a unique convergence of bloodlines and destinies. The Red Dragon Emperor's power, combined with Saiyan potential, creates possibilities previously unimagined in any universe I've observed. She tapped her staff against the floor, and the chamber transformed again, this time into what appeared to be a vast training arena with various apparatus Issei didn't recognize. But more importantly, she continued, because despite your power, despite your heritage, despite even the betrayal you've experienced, you retain a fundamental quality essential for what's to come. What quality? Issei asked, rising to his feet as the meal disappeared. Vados's lips curved in a subtle smile. Hope, the unwavering belief that protection, not destruction, represents the truest expression of strength. Before Issei could respond, the floor beneath him suddenly increased in gravity, driving him to his knees with crushing force. Now, Vados declared, floating effortlessly above the gravity-enhanced arena, we begin your real training. Lesson 2. Adapting to extreme conditions. As Issei struggled to saint, and under what felt like 10 times Earth's normal gravity, a strange sense of rightness settled over him. The challenge before him was immense, the future uncertain, the betrayal still raw, and yet, the first time since his transformation had begun, he felt something like peace. This was who he was meant to be. Not just a devil, not just the Red Dragon Emperor, but a warrior carrying the legacy of a lost race, with the power to protect everything that mattered. With shaking limbs and iron determination, Issei Hyodo, the last known Saiyan of his dimension, pushed himself upright against the crushing gravity, taking the first step on a path that would transform him into something beyond even his own imagination. I'm ready, he declared, the golden aura of his ki beginning to flare around him once more. Teach me everything. Vados nodded in approval, her staff glowing with building energy. Then let us begin, young Saiyan. Your ascension awaits. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Blood of Warriors. 3 weeks into his training with Vados, Issei discovered that Saiyan heritage came with a price far steeper than mere physical exhaustion. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he forced himself to stand once more. Blood trickling from a dozen minor wounds that his accelerated healing hadn't yet addressed. Again, Vados commanded, her voice betraying neither impatience nor sympathy as she observed from the edge of the gravity chamber. Your form deteriorates after the 17th sequence. Precision must be maintained regardless of fatigue. Issei nodded wordlessly, resuming the complex kata she had taught him that morning, a series of movements designed to channel ki through specific pathways in his body. Under 30 times Earth's normal gravity, even breathing required conscious effort. Executing the precise movements felt like swimming through concrete. Your Saiyan ancestors performed these exercises as children, Vados noted, circling him with analytical eyes. Though admittedly, they had the advantage of growing up on a high-gravity planet. Despite the crushing pressure, Issei managed a strained smile. Lucky me, getting the crash course. His response earned the faintest hint of amusement from his enigmatic mentor, a micro-expression he'd learned to recognize over their weeks together. Vados's teaching style was exacting and uncompromising. Yet Issei had gradually detected something beneath her clinical exterior. Genuine interest in his progress, perhaps even a measure of respect for his determination. As he completed the sequence, channeling ki through his palm to form a concentrated energy sphere, Issei reflected on how radically his life had transformed in so short a time. 3 weeks in this pocket dimension, just over 2.ys in the real world, had advanced his understanding and control of his Saiyan abilities more than he would have thought possible. The betrayal still burned, a constant ember in his chest that occasionally threatened to flare into consuming rage. But increasingly, that pain was being channeled into purpose, a driving force behind every punishing training session, every new technique mastered, every threshold of power surpassed. Sufficient, Vados finally declared, tapping her staff to restore normal gravity. Your key control has improved markedly, though your technique remains unrefined. Issei collapsed cross-legged onto the floor, gulping in air now that his lungs could expand normally. Unrefined is still better than catastrophic, which is what you called it last week. Indeed, your progress exceeds my initial calculations. Vados conjured a floating 3-dimensional display between them, a complex matrix of energy readings taken during Issei's training. However, certain anomalies persist. She expanded a particular section of the display, highlighting energy patterns that pulsed with dual signatures, one golden white, unmistakably Saiyan Ki, the other crimson and draconic. The boosted gear continues to interact with your Saiyan energy in unpredicted ways, she explained, manipulating the display to show various interaction points. Traditional Saiyan techniques draw power exclusively from within. Your sacred gear, however, amplifies power through external means. Is that bad? Issei asked, studying the complex energy readings with newfound comprehension. His academic abilities had never been remarkable, but Vados's teaching methods, combining theoretical knowledge with immediate practical application, had awakened an intellectual curiosity he hadn't known he possessed. Not inherently, Vados replied thoughtfully, merely unprecedented. The potential applications are intriguing. She dismissed the display with a gesture and produced a small vial containing what appeared to be liquid light. Your recovery regimen. Then we will proceed to phase 2 of today's training. Issei accepted the vial without hesitation, downing its contents in a single swallow. The effect was immediate, a rush of warmth spreading through his limbs, accelerating the already remarkable Saiyan healing process. Cuts sealed, bruises faded, and depleted energy reserves began to replenish. You know, he commented, rising to his feet with renewed vitality. On Earth, accepting strange glowing liquids from mysterious beings usually ends badly in every movie ever. Vados raised an elegant eyebrow. If I wished you harm, Issei Hyodo, there are far more efficient methods at my disposal. That's not actually reassuring. A subtle curve touched Vados's lips. The closest thing to a smile she typically displayed. As intended, complacency is the enemy of progress. With a tap of her staff, the training chamber transformed around them. The stark, utilitarian space expanded into a vast landscape reminiscent of a barren alien world, crimson skies above rust-colored plains, punctuated by jagged stone formations that defied gravitational logic. Phase 2, Vados announced. Practical application in variable environments. Your objective is simple. Survive for 1 hour. Before Issei could question the parameters, Vados vanished in a flash of light, leaving him alone in the alien landscape. Almost immediately, he sensed movement from multiple directions, predatory energy signatures converging on his position. From behind a nearby rock formation emerged a creature that resembled a cross between a lion and a reptile, its scaled hide glistening like oil in the red sunlight. 3 more appeared from different directions, moving with predatory grace as they surrounded him. Seriously, Issei muttered, dropping into a defensive stance. From physics lessons to monster fighting. Great teaching progression. The largest creature launched itself at him with startling speed. 3 weeks ago, the attack would have overwhelmed him completely. Now, with enhanced Saiyan reflexes and weeks of intensive training, Issei saw the movement almost in slow motion. He sidestepped the charge, channeling ki through his arm as Vados had taught him. The resulting strike caught the creature mid-leap, sending it crashing into one of its companions. Sorry about this, Issei called to the recovering beasts. Nothing personal. The remaining 2 creatures circled more cautiously, intelligence gleaming in their reptilian eyes. They attacked simultaneously from opposite directions, forcing Issei to make a split-second decision. He leapt straight upward, channeling ki to maintain altitude as the creatures collided beneath him. They're not real, partner, came Ddrake's voice from within. Training constructs created from energy. You needn't hold back. You sure? Issei replied mentally, hovering above the regrouping predators. They seem pretty solid to me. I can sense their composition. Impressive simulations, but ultimately artificial. The angel is testing your combat instincts without risking actual bloodshed. Reassured, Issei gathered ki between his palms, a technique he'd been practicing for days with limited success. This time, however, the energy coalesced more readily, forming a pulsing sphere of golden light. Let's see if this works better than last time, he muttered, taking aim at the largest creature below. He released the energy with a forward thrust of both hands, sending the sphere hurtling downward. The resulting explosion far exceeded his expectations, creating a crater several meters wide and scattering the creatures. When the dust settled, two lay motionless, while the others retreated to a safe distance. Reassessing their strategy, Issei stared at his hands in surprise. Okay, that was definitely stronger than yesterday. Your power increases after each recovery from exertion, Ddrake observed. A peculiar trait of your Saiyan physiology. The more you push your limits, the greater your potential becomes. Before Issei could fully process this information, the environment shifted around him. The barren landscape transformed into a dense jungle, humid air replacing the dry heat of the previous setting. His aerial advantage disappeared as thick foliage obscured his view in all directions. New threats emerged almost immediately, not predatory creatures this time, but humanoid figures moving with practiced stealth through the undergrowth. Unlike the beasts, these opponents wielded weapons and, more concerning, what appeared to be rudimentary ki manipulation. Let me guess, Issei called out, dropping to the jungle floor in a defensive crouch. This is the variable part of variable environments. As if in answer, a barrage of energy projectiles converged on his position from multiple directions. Issei channeled ki into a hasty barrier, another technique he'd only partially mastered, managing to deflect most of the assault. Several blasts broke through, searing his shoulder and leg with painful efficiency. Focus, partner, Ddrake urged as Issei ducked behind a massive tree trunk. These constructs appeared to be modeled after Saiyan hunters, specialized forces once employed to track and eliminate rogue Saiyans. Good to know, Issei grunted, assessing the burns on his leg. They were painful but superficial, already beginning to heal thanks to his Saiyan regenerative abilities. Any weaknesses I should know about? They hunt in coordinated units, relying on superior numbers and tactical precision to overcome stronger individual opponents. So, divide and conquer. Issei grinned despite the pain. I can work with that. Drawn. Jian techniques he'd learned during his time with the Occult Research Club, now enhanced by his Saiyan abilities, Issei closed his eyes and extended his senses outward. He detected 5 distinct energy signatures surrounding his position, moving in a practiced formation designed to eliminate escape routes. Rather than waiting for their next assault, Issei made a split-second decision. He channeled ki to enhance his speed and launched himself directly toward the nearest hunter, catching the humanoid construct by surprise. A quick series of strikes disabled it before it could alert its companions. One down, Issei whispered, dragging the incapacitated construct behind dense foliage. 4 to go. Over the next 15 minutes, Issei employed guerrilla tactics, using the jungle environment to separate and neutralize the hunting party one by one. Each encounter required different approaches, some resolved through direct combat, others through misdirection and stealth. The final hunter proved the most challenging, adapting to Issei's tactics and nearly succeeding in a counterambush that would have ended the exercise prematurely. Only a desperate, intuitive combination of ki manipulati on and the boosted gear's power allowed Issei to prevail. As the last construct dissolved into particles of light, the jungle around him shimmered and faded, returning to the neutral training chamber where Vados awaited, staff in hand. 47 minutes, she noted, studying readings on a spectral display. You employed Saiyan abilities in conjunction with previously learned techniques, an effective integration. However, you relied excessively on reactive strategies rather than controlling the engagement. Issei braced himself against the wall, fatigue setting in as adrenaline faded. They were hunting me. Being reactive seemed appropriate, A true Saiyan warrior creates circumstances, not merely responds to them, Vados countered, dismissing the display. Nevertheless, your adaptability shows promise. We will refine these skills in subsequent sessions. She gestured, and a simple meal materialized as it had after each intensive training period: fruits, proteins, and complex carbohydrates carefully selected to support Issei's increasingly demanding metabolism. As he ate with the voracious appetite typical of Saiyan recovery, Issei broached the question that had been forming throughout their training sessions. "You've taught me a lot about Saiyan abilities," he said between mouthfuls, "but almost nothing about Saiyan history. About where I come from. Who my ancestors were." Vados considered him thoughtfully. "I questioned whether such knowledge would benefit your immediate training goals." "It would benefit my understanding of who I am," Issei countered, meeting her gaze directly. After weeks under her tutelage, he'd grown more comfortable challenging her decisions, something she seemed to quietly encourage despite her authoritative teaching style. After a moment's consideration, Vados nodded. "A reasonable request. Your heritage is indeed relevant to your development." With a tap of her staff, the chamber darkened, and a holographic display materialized. Far more comprehensive than the brief glimpses she'd shown previously. A red planet orbiting a crimson sun appeared first, rotating slowly to reveal diverse but harsh terrain. "Planet Vegeta," Vados began, her voice taking on a scholarly tone. "Named after the royal lineage that unified the Saiyan race approximately 1,000 years ago. Prior to unification, Saiyans existed as nomadic tribal groups, constantly at war with one another and the planet's native tuffles." The display shifted to show humanoid figures with distinctive tails and rugged features. Despite their human-like appearance, something about their bearing, their predatory alertness, their innate confidence, marked them as fundamentally different. Saiyans evolved in an environment of extreme gravity and harsh conditions, Vados continued. Natural selection favored physical strength, combat adaptability, and aggressive expansion. Their society developed around martial prowess, with social standing determined primarily through battle accomplishments. Images showed primitive Saiyan settlements evolving into more structured societies, though still clearly organized around martial principles. Arenas, training grounds, and military structures featured prominently in their architecture. The most distinctive Saiyan characteristic, beyond their physical capabilities, was their genetic response to near-death experiences. Each recovery from critical injury resulted in substantial power increases, a trait unique among known sentient species. Issei absorbed these details with growing fascination. Certain aspects of his own personality, his competitive drive, his unwillingness to accept defeat, his satisfaction in overcoming challenges, suddenly made more sense as inherited traits rather than random psychological developments. "What happened to them?" he asked quietly. "You mentioned planet Vegeta was destroyed." The holographic display darkened, showing a massive energy sphere descending toward the planet, followed by catastrophic destruction. "Lord Frieza, emperor of much of that universe, ordered the planet's destruction," Vados explained clinically. Official records cited a meteor collision, but the truth was far more deliberate. Frieza feared the Saiyan potential, particularly the legends of the Super Saiyan transformation. "The golden form," Issei murmured, remembering his partial transformation during the betrayal. Indeed, according to ancient Saiyan prophecy, a Super Saiyan would emerge every 1,000 years, a warrior of unparalleled power capable of challenging even the gods. Frieza, despite his own remarkable strength, feared this possibility enough to commit genocide. The display showed scattered escape pods launching from the doomed planet, most intercepted by Frieza's forces. Only a handful escaped detection. Very few Saiyans survived. Some were off-world on assignments. Others, like your ancestor, escaped in the chaos. Most of these survivors were infants or very young children, sent away by parents who suspected Frieza's intentions. Vados adjusted the display to show one particular escape pod's trajectory, a winding path through dimensional boundaries that eventually terminated on Earth. "Your great-grandmother arrived on this planet approximately 70 years ago, one of perhaps a dozen Saiyan children scattered across multiple dimensions. With no ledge of her heritage and no adult Saiyans to guide her, she integrated into human society, passing her genes to subsequent generations with progressive dilution." Issei studied the trajectory with growing comprehension. "But if my Saiyan blood is so diluted, how am I able to access these powers? Shouldn't they have been bred out over generations? An insightful question, Vados acknowledged with approval. Saiyan genetic expression is remarkably resilient, remaining dormant rather than diminishing when mixed with compatible species. In most cases, this dormancy would persist indefinitely. Your unique circumstances created activation conditions. The display shifted to show Issei's own energy signature, the distinctive Saiyan golden key interwoven with the crimson energy of the boosted gear. When the Red Dragon Emperor's power awakened within you, it resonated with your dormant Saiyan genes, essentially, reminding your DNA of its heritage. The subsequent emotional and physical trauma you experienced accelerated the activation process dramatically. Issei considered this information, fitting it into the puzzle of his identity. So I'm not just part Saiyan. I'm a Saiyan whose powers were jump-started by becoming a devil and hosting D-Drake. A unique convergence, Vados confirmed. One without precedent in my considerable observation of the multiverse. The holographic display dissolved, returning the chamber to normal illumination. Vados regarded Issei with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. Understanding your heritage is valuable. However, I must emphasize that you are neither bound nor limited by it. The Saiyan path traditionally prioritized combat prowess above all else, often at the expense of other forms of development. She tapped her staff lightly against the floor, creating ripples of energy that spread outward. Your potential extends beyond mere fighting capability. The combination of Saiyan adaptability, draconic power, and your own unique perspective offers possibilities no pure-blooded Saiyan could have achieved. Something in her tone, an unusual hint of personal investment beneath the clinical assessment, caught Issei's attention. Before he could pursue this thread, however, a subtle shift in the chamber's ambient energy signaled the end of their designated rest period. The day's training is not yet complete, Vados announced, returning to her more familiar instructional demeanor. Now that you've demonstrated basic combat competency, we must address a critical aspect of Saiyan power, energy projection at scale. With a gesture, she transported them to an outdoor training area, a vast rocky plain extending to the horizon in all directions. Unlike the simulated environments of previous exercises, this location had a solidity that suggested they had actually left the pocket dimension. Where are we? Issei asked, feeling the harsh wind against his face. A deserted moon in a neighboring dimension, Vados replied. Uninhabited, technically stable, and sufficiently remote for our purposes. She pointed toward a distant mountain range. Your next exercise is straightforward. Direct a concentrated energy beam at those mountains, focusing on maximum power output rather than precision. Issei eyed the distant target dubiously. You want me to blow up mountains? Just like that? Saiyan energy projection is among your most fundamental abilities. Vados explained. The technique has various names across dimensions: Gallic Gun, Kamehameha, Final Flash, but the principle remains consistent. Concentrated ki released in a directed wave. She demonstrated with casual elegance, extending one hand toward a different mountain peak. A beam of pale blue energy, no wider than her wrist, shot forth with perfect linearity. When it struck the distant target, the resulting explosion reduced the entire mountain to rubble with a thunderous roar that reached them seconds later. Holy! Issei stared at the destruction with equal parts awe and apprehension. And you expect me to do that? I've barely managed energy spheres the size of baseballs. The limitation is psychological, not physical, Vados countered. Your controlled exercises focused on precision to prevent accidental destruction. This exercise specifically removes that constraint. She positioned herself behind him, correcting his stance with light ouches that sent inexplicable warmth through Issei's system, a reaction he filed away for later examination. Center your weight, she instructed. Connect to your core energy. Visualize a channel from your center through your arms, terminating at your target. Issei complied, settling into the stance and focusing as directed. He felt the now familiar warmth of his ki responding, gathering in his center and flowing outward as he extended his hands toward the distant mountains. Now release, not in controlled increments, but all at once. Drawing a deep breath, Issei attempted to follow her instructions. Energy gathered between his palms, forming a sphere of golden light that pulsed with building pressure. When he tried to release it as a beam, however, the energy dissipated harmlessly into the air. I can't, he began, frustration evident in his voice. You can, Vados interrupted firmly. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. Release your conscious control. Let your Saiyan instincts guide the technique. Issei closed his eyes, trying a different approach. Rather than intellectualizing the process, he reached for the primal core of his newly awakened heritage, the part of him that had responded instinctively during the betrayal. This is who I am. This is in my blood. Something shifted within him. A lock disengaging, a barrier dissolving. When he opened his eyes, golden energy crackled around his body, responding to his intent rather than his conscious direction. Without overthinking the mechanics, Issei brought his hands together at his side, cupping them as if holding something precious. Energy gathered there, condensing into a sphere of brilliant light that illuminated the barren landscape around them. Words came to his lips, not taught, but remembered from somewhere deep in his genetic memory. Ka, me, ha, me. The energy sphere compressed further, intensifying until it hurt to look at directly. Issei felt power building to a threshold he'd never experienced, exhilarating and terrifying simultaneously. He thrust his hands forward, releasing the contained energy in a massive beam that tore across the landscape, crossing the distance to the mountains in seconds. When it struck, the resulting explosion dwarfed Vados's demonstration, obliterating not just one peak but an entire section of the mountain range in a spectacular display visible even from their distant position. The backlash knocked Issei off his feet, sending him tumbling backward several meters before he managed to stabilize himself with a hasty application of ki. As the dust cloud rose on the horizon, he stared at his hands in disbelief. I didn't mean to destroy quite that much, he managed, voice hoarse from the exertion and the instinctive battle cry. Vados observed the destruction with analytical interest. An impressive first attempt. Approximately 17% of your potential output, by my calculation. 17%. Issei echoed incredulously. That was, I just leveled half a mountain range. Indeed, Saiyan energy projection scales exponentially with practice and emotional investment. She made an adjustment on her staff, taking readings from the aftermath. The technique you instinctively employed, the Kamehameha wave, originated with a martial arts master from Universe 7. Interesting that this specific foe manifested rather than another variant. Still stunned by the scale of destruction he'd caused, Issei struggled to process the implications. If this represented just a fraction of his potential output, what would full power look like? The responsibility felt suddenly overwhelming. Don't worry, Vados added, correctly interpreting his expression. Control develops alongside power. You won't accidentally destroy your home world while sneezing. Despite the gravity of the situation, Issei found himself laughing, a release of tension he hadn't realized had been building. That's oddly specific and not entirely reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Vados permitted herself a small smile. Healthy concern about one's capabilities prevents recklessness. Now, shall we attempt to refine your technique? Your energy efficiency could use considerable improvement. For the next hour, Issei practiced energy projection under Vados's exacting guidance, gradually learning to modulate the our output and maintain consistent beam cohesion. Each successful attempt came more naturally than the last, as if his body were remembering rather than learning. By the time they returned to the pocket dimension, Issei was physically exhausted but mentally exhilarated. Unlocking this fundamental Saiyan ability felt like reconnecting with a part of himself he hadn't known was missing, like finding a piece of home he'd never known existed. Your progress continues to exceed parameters, Vados noted as they materialized in the now familiar chamber that served as both training room and living quarters. Tomorrow we will begin integration exercises, combining your Saiyan abilities with the boosted gear's unique properties. She turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. Rest well, Issei Hyodo. Your body requires recovery to process today's advancements. After she departed, Issei collapsed onto the simple pallet that served as his bed, muscles aching pleasantly from the day's exertions. Despite the physical fatigue, his mind remained active, processing everything he'd learned about his heritage and abilities. You're adapting well, partner, Dedrade commented from within. Few hosts have mastered new power systems so quickly. I'm not sure. Mastered is the right word, Issei replied aloud, staring at the ceiling. More like, remembered. It's strange, DBZ. Using K. I feels more natural than devil magic ever did, even though I've been a devil much longer than I've known about being part Saiyan. Devil magic is fundamentally external, power drawn from contracts, rituals, and dimensional energy. He comes from within, your life force, your essence. One is borrowed, the other intrinsic. Issei considered this distinction. Do you think that's why Rias and the others wanted to extract my power? Because they sensed it was different, stronger. The question still carried emotional weight, though the raw pain had gradually transformed into something more contemplative. Understanding didn't erase the betrayal, but it helped contextualize it. The Grimoire girl likely sensed potential she didn't understand, DBZ responded after a thoughtful pause. Power often clouds judgment, especially among the young. Her methods were unconscionable, but her recognition of your significance wasn't entirely misguided. Still doesn't excuse trying to rip the power out of me, Issei muttered. No, it doesn't. The ancient dragon's voice carried uncharacteristic gentleness. Rest now, partner. Tomorrow brings new challenges. Exhaustion finally overtook Issei's active mind, drawing him into deep sleep filled with dreams of red skies and golden warriors. Morning arrived with unexpected company. Issei awoke to the distinctive sensati of being watched, a prickling awareness that had become more acute with his developing Saiyan senses. Opening his eyes, he found himself staring into slitted golden irises mere inches from his face. Interesting. Heard a feminine voice. Your auras changed completely, Sekiryute. Instinct took over before conscious thought. Issei rolled sideways off his pallet, coming up in a defensive street. Ants with ki already gathering around his fists. The movement was fluid, efficient, a product of weeks of intensive training. His visitor appeared entirely unfazed by the display, lounging casually where his head had been moments before. Voluptuous and feline, with long black hair and distinctive Nekomata features, she observed him with predatory amusement. Kuroka, Issei identified her, maintaining his guard. How did you get in here? This dimension is supposed to be sealed. The SS-class stray devil stretched languidly, her black kimono slipping provocatively off one shoulder. Dimensiona. L boundaries are more suggestion than law when you know the right techniques, Nya. She tilted her head, studying him with unabashed curiosity. Though I must say, finding you was considerably more challenging than anticipated. Your energy signature has evolved since our last encounter. Issei remained cautious but lowered his hands, dispersing the gathered ki. His previous interactions with Kuroka had been limited but tense. She was Kaniko's estranged sister, an infamously powerful stray devil with unpredictable motives and dangerous abilities. What do you want? He asked directly. SSING potential escape routes should the encounter turn hostile. Kuroka rolled onto her stomach, propping her chin on her hands with feline grace. Her tail swayed lazily behind her, betraying interest despite her casual demeanor. Initially, to determine if rumors of your disappearance were exaggerated. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. The supernatural community is abuzz with speculation. He read Dragon Emperor vanishes after an unexplained energy surge at Kuo Academy. The Grimoire heiress subsequently goes into seclusion. Most interesting coincidence, Nya. She inhaled deeply, closing her eyes momentarily. But upon arriving, I discovered something far more intriguing. Your scent has changed. Your energy has transformed. Her eyes opened, fixing him with an intense gaze. You're not just a devil anymore, are you? Sekiryute. Before Issei could respond, the chamber's entrance shimmered, and Vados materialized, staff at the ready, her normally serene expression replaced by alert vigilance. An unexpected visitor, she observed, power radiating from her slender form. One who bypassed considerable safeguards. Kuroka sat up, regarding the newcomer with cautious respect. The Nekomata's playful demeanor receded, replaced by wary calculation as she assessed the palpable power difference. My, I didn't realize the Sekiryute had such formidable company. She rose gracefully to her feet, maintaining a deliberately non-threatening posture. No hostile intentions here, merely feline curiosity, I assure you. Curiosity that led you through 17 layers of dimensional shielding, Vados noted. her tone mild but carrying unmistakable warning. A remarkable feat for a being of your classification. Kuroka's eyes widened slightly at the implied knowledge of her capabilities. You're not from around here, are you? Not angel, devil, yokai, or god that I recognize. My origins are irrelevant to this discussion. Vados turned to Issei. I detected the breach approximately 3 minutes ago. Your interaction suggested you know this individual. Issei nodded, relaxing slightly now that Vados was present. Kuroka, former member of Valley's team. SS Class STR. I devil with space-time manipulation abilities. Ah, you remember me, Kuroka purred, tail swishing playfully. I'm flattered. Vados considered the Nekomata thoughtfully, then lowered her staff, not standing down entirely, but reducing the immediate threat level. Your arrival is poorly timed but potentially useful, she declared after a moment's calculation. Issei's training would benefit ROM practical application against diverse opponent types. Kuroka's eyebrows rose in surprise. Training, is that what's happening here? Her gaze returned to Issei with renewed interest. No wonder your aura's evolving so rapidly. But training for what, exactly? Issei exchanged glances with Vados, who gave a slight nod, permission to share limited information. I've discovered some unexpected heritage, he explained carefully. I'm learning to control the abilities that come with it. Kuroka circled him slowly, nostrils flaring as she took in his scent and energy from different angles. Not yokai, not divine. Something I've never encountered before. She stopped directly in front of him, leaning uncomfortably close. How fascinating. And potent. Her proximity triggered an expected physiological response in Issei. Not the typical teenage hormonal reaction he might have experienced weeks ago, but something more primal. His Saiyan instincts recognized Kuroka as a powerful potential mate, triggering subtle chemical signals his newly enhanced senses detected clearly. Kuroka noticed the reaction immediately, a sly smile spreading across her features. Oh, what's this? Our body recognizes something your mind hasn't caught up to yet, NYA. Vados intervened smoothly, interposing her staff between them. Saiyan physiology responds to potential genetic compatibility with powerful individuals. A biological imperative rather than conscious selection. Saiyan, Kuroka repeated, testing the unfamiliar term. Is that what he is now? Some new species I've never heard of. An ancient warrior race from another dimension, Vados clarified with clinical precision. Issei carries their bloodline, recently activated through unusual circumstances. Understanding dawned in Kuroka's eyes, followed by undisguised interest. A warrior bloodline from another dimension. No wonder the Grimoire girl went to ground after your disappearance. She must have realized what she lost. The casual reference to Rias triggered a flash of memory, the betrayal still fresh enough to evoke emotional response. Issei's aura flared briefly before he regained control, but not before Kuroka had registered the reaction. Ah, she murmured, piecing together the situation. Not just lost, rejected. How deliciously ironic. The pawn she discarded was actually her most valuable piece. That's not your concern, Issei stated firmly, uncomfortable with her prodding at still tender wounds. Kuroka's expression shifted to something surprisingly genuine, a flash of empathy quickly masked behind her typical playfulness. Rejection is a familiar story for strays, Sekiryute. Some of us are discarded for what we are, others for what we might become. The comment revealed more about her personal history than she likely intended. Issei recalled fragments of her backstory, how she'd killed her master to protect herself and Kaneko, becoming a stray out of necessity rather than choice. Before he could pursue this unexpected connection, Vados redirected the conversation. Your presence offers an opportunity, she addressed Kuroka directly. Issei's training requires exposure to diverse combat styles and energy types. Your yokai abilities would provide valuable experience. Kuroka's eyes lit with interest. A sparring invitation. How could I refuse such an intriguing proposal? She circled Issei again, this time with more overtly analytical assessment. Though I wonder what's in it for me, besides the obvious entertainment value. Knowledge, Vados replied simply. About powers beyond your current understanding. About potential futures that may impact your kind. The Nekomata's casual demeanor faltered momentarily, revealing sharper calculation beneath. You speak as if why? Oh, you know something about yokai futures specifically. I observe many possibilities across dimensions, Vados stated cryptically, including potential extinction events for various supernatural species. The statement landed with calculated precision. Kuroka's playfulness vanished entirely, replaced by intense focus. Extinction events. The coming convergence affects all supernatural factions, not merely Issei's immediate concerns. Vados tapped her staff once against the floor, creating a dimensional viewing portal that displayed chaotic energy patterns spreading across multiple planes of existence. What manifests as Saiyan awakening in Issei represents merely one facet of a multidimensional realignment. Kuroka studied the display with growing comprehension, her extensive knowledge of space-time manipulation allowing her to grasp implications that might have escaped others. The barriers are thinning, she murmured, tracing a pattern in the air that mirrored certain distortions in the display. Not just between our traditional realms, but between others. Dimensions of never sensed before. Precisely, Vados confirmed. The Nekomata, as natural sensors of dimensional energies, will be among the first supernatural species to experience effects. Preparation would be prudent. The strategic revelation accomplished exactly what Vados clearly intended. Kuroka's stir shifted from casual visitor to invested participant, her self-interest aligning with their objectives. Well then, she purred, though the sound carried new undertones of seriousness, it seems. I have practical reasons to observe the Security's development. When do we begin this cultural exchange? Immediately, Vados declared, transforming the chamber with a gesture. The space expanded into a specialized combat arena, with various energy-dampening fields to contain potential damage. Issei requires practical experience against opponents with unconventional abilities. Your Senju, Su and space-time manipulation present ideal challenges. Issei found himself positioned at one end of the arena, with Kuroka taking position at the opposite end. Despite the sudden transition from awkward reunion to combat exercise, he felt a familiar calm settling over him, the Saiyan warrior's instinct responding to the prospect of testing his abilities. Combat parameters, Vados announced, creating a barrier between herself and the arena. Non-lethal techniques only. Victory by incapacitation or surrender. Combat continues until I declare a conclusion. Kuroka shed her outer kimono, revealing a more practical combat outfit beneath. Her playful demeanor remained, but her eyes had sharpened with predatory focus. Don't hold back, Securite, she called, Senjutsu energy already gathering around her hands. Show me this Saiyan power that's got dimensional beings creating training programs. Issei settled into a defensive stance, ki flowing naturally through his system. Just remember you asked for this, he replied, allowing a small smile as the familiar pre-battle excitement, now recognized as a Saiyan trait, surged through his veins. Kuroka struck first, disappearing from view and reappearing directly behind him, a space-time technique that would have caught him completely off guard weeks ago. Now, however, his enhanced senses detected the subtle distortion preceding her movement, allowing him to pivot and block her strike millimeters from connecting. Oh ho! Kuroka's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Your reflexes have improved considerably, Nya. Not waiting for her to regain initiative, Issei channeled ki through his arm and launched a counter-strike, carefully modulated to test rather than harm. Kuroka evaded with feline grace, but the edge of his ki-enhanced blow caught her shoulder, sending her skidding backward several meters. She rubbed the contact point, expression shifting from surprise to genuine interest. Physical enhancement beyond devil capabilities. Fascinating. The next exchange proceeded at speeds that would have been invisible to normal humans. Kuroka unleashed a barrage of senjutsu techniques, ghostly blue flames that sought Issei like guided missiles. Space-time distortions that attempted to trap his limbs in temporal bubbles, illusions designed to disorient and misdirect. Drawing on his weeks of intensive training, Issei responded with increasingly fluid combinations of Saiyan techniques and adapted devil abilities. He used ki barriers to deflect senjutsu attacks, short-range energy bursts to disrupt her space-time manipulations, and relied on enhanced senses to pierce through illusions. Not bad, Securite, Kuroka acknowledged after several minutes of high-intensity exchange had left them both breathing harder. But you're still fighting defensively. Show me what you can really do. The challenge struck a chord. Throughout his training with Vados, Issei had focused primarily on control and precision, necessary foundations. But perhaps limiting his full expression. Kuroka's taunt reminded him that Saiyan combat wasn't merely about technical proficiency but about pushing boundaries. Drawing a deep breath, he allowed his ki to surge more naturally, golden aura flaring around him with newfound intensity. The familiar warmth of the boosted gear activated simultaneously, responding to his emotional state. Boost. The sacred gear's familiar announcement echoed through the arena as crimson energy interwove with golden ki, creating a distinctive hybrid aura that Vados had termed dragon-enhanced Saiyan state. Kuroka's eyes widened as she sensed the exponential power increase. Now that's more like it, she purred, gathering her own power in response. Let's see what this hybrid energy can do. What followed was less a controlled sparring match than a spectacular display of supernatural abilities. Issei moved with newfound confidence, his attacks flowing from instinct rather than calculation. Kuroka matched his escalation, drawing on her considerable reserves as an SS-class devil. The climactic exchange came when Kuroka unleashed her ultimate technique, a space-time distortion field. Designed to trap opponents in a bubble of accelerated time, aging them rapidly while preventing movement. In previous encounters, such a technique would have been devastating. Now, however, Issei's enhanced perception detected the dimensional fluctuations preceding the effect. Drawing on both Saiyan ki and the boosted gear's power, he executed a technique Vados had only recently introduced, dimensional phase shifting. Instead of being trapped in Kuroka's time distortion, he briefly shifted his molecular structure to an adjacent dimensional frequency, causing the technique to pass harmlessly through him. In the moment of Kuroka's surprise, he closed the distance between them with explosive speed. His final strike stopped a hair's breadth from her throat, a ki-enhanced hand capable of shattering concrete. Held with perfect control at the critical moment. Yield, he suggested quietly, golden crimson aura still flaring around him. Kuroka remained perfectly still, genuine respect replacing her typical playfulness. I yield, she acknowledged, then added with a sly smile, for now. Vados disengaged the arena barriers, approaching with analytical interest. A productive exchange. Issei, your integration of Saiyan techniques with the boosted gear's enhancement shows marked improvement. The dimensional phase shift execution was particularly noteworthy. Kuroka, recovering her outer kimono with unhurried grace, studied Issei with newfound appreciation. I've fought high-class devils, fallen angels, even gods. Your power signature is unlike any of them. She approached, deliberately invading his personal space. I find it extremely interesting. The implication in her tone was unmistakable. Issei found himself responding on multiple levels, the teenage boy he'd been reacting with predictable hormonal interest. While the emerging Saiyan warrior recognized a potential mate of significant genetic value. The combination created a confusing but not unpleasant tension. Vados intervened with practiced timing. Physiological responses noted. Cultural context review required. She turned to Kuroka with calm authority. Nekomata mating instincts are responding to Saiyan pheromones. This biological compatibility is expected but premature in the current training phase. Rather than being offended by the clinical assessment, Kuroka appeared amused. My, direct, aren't you? She circled Issei once more. This time with deliberate sensuality. But not incorrect. Your student's new nature calls to certain instincts of mine. Issei cleared his throat, attempting to regain conversational footing. Look, Kuroka, I appreciate the sparring session, but nothing, she interrupted, golden eyes gleaming. I've made a decision, Sekiryute. Or should I say, Saiyan warrior. You've become infinitely more interesting than before. She placed a finger against his chest, tracing the outline of a muscle that hadn't existed weeks earlier. Your previous fixation on the Grimoire princess was always tedious, predictable, boring. But this, she gestured to encompass his transformed self, this has potential. Before either Issei or Vados could respond, distant alarms echoed through the dimension, warning signals Vados had established to monitor external threats. Dimensional incursion detected, Vados announced, consulting energy readings that materialized around her staff. Multiple signatures approaching Earth coordinates corresponding to Kuo Town. Energy patterns suggest organized search parameters. Let me guess, Kuroka interjected, suddenly serious. They're looking for him. She nodded toward Issei. Correct. Vados manipulated the readings, expanding certain sections. Bounty hunters. Specialized in tracking unique energy signatures across dimensional boundaries. Likely hired by interested parties seeking to acquire Issei's power or eliminate its potential threat. Issei absorbed this information with growing resolve rather than fear. Weeks of intensive training had fundamentally altered his response to danger, transforming anxiety into strategic assessment. How soon will they arrive? He asked, already mentally cataloging combat techniques suitable for multiple opponents. They've already breached atmospheric boundaries, Vados replied. Estimated 17 minutes until they locate the dimensional access point nearest our position. Kuroka's expression turned calculating. Bounty hunters with dimensional tracking abilities. Sounds like the Void Trackers. Nasty bunch. Rumored to work for collectors of unique beings. Your assessment is accurate, Vados confirmed. The Void Collective maintains hunter units for acquisition of specimens with unusual genetic or energy profiles. She turned to Issei, her expression betraying subtle concern beneath its usual composure. This confrontation arrives earlier than optimal in your training progression. However, it presents a valuable practical assessment opportunity. In other words, Issei translated mentally, I'm not fully prepared, but we need to know if I can handle real combat anyway. We have faced worse odds, partner, Dedrade commented from within. Your capabilities have advanced considerably. True, Issei acknowledged silently. But these aren't mindless monsters or arrogant fallen angels. They sound like specialized professionals who hunt people like me for a living. Aloud, he asked, what's our strategy? Stand and fight, or relocate to another dimension? Neither, Vados decided after brief calculation. This threat must be addressed directly to prevent recurring pursuit. However, engagement parameters require adjustment to maximize success probability. With a gesture, she summoned combat gear specifically designed for Issei during their training, lightweight armor that adapted to his movement patterns while providing essential protection. We will intercept them before they fully materialize, she continued, aiding a dimensional viewing portal showing the approaching hunters, 6 humanoid figures in specialized containment gear, traversing the space between dimensions with practiced efficiency. Kuroka stepped forward, surprising both Issei and Vados. I'm coming with you, she declared, her typical playfulness replaced by firm resolve. If the barriers are thinning as you've shown, these hunters represent a threat to yokai as well. Better to understand their capabilities firsthand. Vados considered the Nekomata briefly before nodding. Your space-time abilities may prove useful in the engagement. However, field command remains with me. Secondary authority with Issei. Kuroka performed a mock salute, some of her playfulness returning. Yes, Captain Tilda. As Issei donned the combat gear, he felt an unexpected calm settling over him. The warrior's focus his Saiyan blood recognized and welcomed. 3 weeks ago, the prospect of facing dimensional bounty hunters would have terrified him. Now, it represented an opportunity to test his growth against meaningful opposition. Remember your training, Vados instructed as she prepared the transport sequence. Control before power, precision before scale. Your objective is neutralization, not destruction. Issei nodded, flexing his hands as golden ki began to flow naturally through his system, responding to his intent without conscious direction. I'm ready, he stated with quiet confidence that surprised even himself. Vados tapped her staff against the floor, creating a transport circle around the 3 of them. Dimensional transit initiating. Prepare for immediate engagement upon arrival. As the transport energy enveloped them, Issei exchanged a brief glance with Kuroka, who winked at him with unexpected camaraderie. Try to keep up, Saiyan boy, she challenged with a predatory grin. I want to see what you can really do when the training wheels come off. The dimensional boundary parted around them, transporting them CTLY to the hunters, arrival coordinates, an abandoned industrial zone on the outskirts of Kuo town. The transition was seamless, depositing them in defensive positions moments before space itself seemed to tear open. Disgorging 6 armored figures through a rift of churning darkness. Void trackers confirmed, Vados announced quietly. Alpha class acquisition team, Specialized containment equipment detected. The hunters paused upon noticing the welcoming committee, their featureless helmets turning in perfect unison toward the unexpected resistance. After a moment's conference, one stepped forward, taller than the others, with distinctive command insignia on their armor. Designation: Issei Hyodo, the leader announced in a voice distorted by translation technology. Classification: anomalous hybrid entity. Status: acquisition target. Surrender protocol initiated. Issei stepped forward to match the leader's stance, allowing his ki to manifest visibly around him, a controlled display of power rather than aggression. "I'm not interested in being acquired," he replied evenly. "Leave this dimension and I won't have to show you why that's a bad idea." The leader's helmet tilted slightly, an almost human gesture of consideration. Interesting. Subject demonstrates unusual confidence. Power assessment recommended before containment attempt. Without warning, one of the hunters raised an arm-mounted device and fired a pulse of energy directly at Issei. Not an attack but an analysis beam designed to measure power levels. Vados made no move to intercept it, clearly allowing the assessment to proceed. When the beam made contact with Issei's aura, the device emitted a series of escalating tones before overloading in a shower of sparks. The hunter examined the damaged EQU. IP meant with what appeared to be surprise. Power classification exceeds measurement parameters, they reported to their leader. Recommend immediate implementation of Omega containment protocols. The leader made a sharp gesture, and all 6 hunters activated weapons systems simultaneously, specialized equipment designed to suppress and contain beings of extraordinary power. "Last chance," Issei offered, settling into a combat stance as golden ki flared more intensely around him. "Walk away. Acquisition non-negotiable," the leader responded flatly. "Target value. Maximum priority." What followed was unlike any battle Issei had experienced before, methodical, coordinated, and executed with ruthless efficiency. The void trackers moved with perfect synchronization, deploying technologies specifically designed to counter energy-based entities. Dimensional anchors attempted to bind Issei's movements. Nullification fields tried to suppress his ki manifestation. Specialized projectiles sought to inject power-dampening compounds into his bloodstream. 3 weeks ago, such an assault would have overwhelmed him completely. Now, however, Issei responded with the fluid integration of Te. Chinook's Vados had drilled into him relentlessly. Dimensional phase shifting to evade the anchors. Key frequency modulation to bypass nullification fields. Enhanced reflexes to avoid projectiles while countering with precisely calculated strikes. Vados observed from a distance, intervening only when truly necessary, allowing Issei to apply his training under genuine combat conditions. Kuroka engaged 2 hunters simultaneously, her space-time manipulation abilities proving particularly effective against their dimensional technologies. The battle's turning point came when the hunters, recognizing conventional tactics were failing, deployed their ultimate containment measure, a resonance cascade designed to forcibly separate energy from physical form, essentially, harvesting power while leaving the host incapacitated. As the device activated, creating an expanding sphere of extraction energy reminiscent of what the Occult Research Club had attempted, something within Issei responded with visceral rejection. The memory of betrayal, combined with the Saiyan instinct for survival under extreme threat, triggered a partial transformation. His hair flashed golden, eyes shifting to teal as his power spiked dramatically. Unlike his first uncontrolled transformation, however, this manifestation remained focused, channeled rather than explosive. "No one takes my power," he stated with quiet intensity, ki condensing between his palms. "Not devils, not bounty hunters. No one." The energy technique he unleashed wasn't the raw Kamehameha of his earlier practice but a refined variation. Vados had helped him develop a precision beam that targeted the resonance device's control matrix with surgical accuracy. The resulting feedback loop caused the device to implode, creating a localized D-dimensional distortion that briefly incapacitated 3 of the hunters. Issei capitalized immediately, moving with enhanced speed to neutralize them before they could recover. Kuroka dispatched her opponents with brutal efficiency, while Vados simply deactivated the leader's entire suit with a precise tap of her staff, leaving them immobilized but conscious. Within minutes, all 6 hunters were contained. their dimensional travel capabilities disabled by targeted strikes to their equipment. Issei approached the leader, partial Super Saiyan transformation still active though fully under control. "Who sent you?" he demanded, voice resonating with the characteristic dual tone of the transformation. The hunter remained silent until Vados approached, her mere presence seemingly enough to recalculate their resistance algorithms. "The Void Collective seeks unique entities across dimensional boundaries," they finally stated. "Your energy signature registered as unprecedented. Acquisition was automatic protocol. And now," Issei pressed, golden aura pulsing with controlled power. "Protocol dictates withdrawal when target demonstrates containment-resistant capabilities beyond operational parameters." The leader's voice carried what might have been reluctant respect beneath the electronic distortion. "You are reclassified." Vados stepped forward. "You will return to your collective with specific information," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "This entity is under dimensional protection protocols. Further acquisition attempts will trigger escalating responses." She tapped her staff against the ground, creating a small but controlled dimensional rift. "This portal returns you to your entry vector. Use it, and survive to report your findings. Resist, and experience consequences beyond your operational understanding." The hunters exchanged unreadable looks through their featureless helmets before the leader nodded once, a gesture of grudging acceptance. "Entity reclassified. Protected anomaly," they confirmed. "Acquisition protocols suspended pending review." One by one, the hunters entered the portal, disappearing back to whatever interdimensional space they called home. As the last one vanished, Vados closed the rift with a casual gesture. "Well done," she addressed Issei, genuine approval in her tone. "Your application of training principles under combat conditions exceeded projected outcomes." As the immediate danger passed, Issei's partial transformation receded, golden hair returning to its natural brown, teal eyes to their normal hue. The power withdrawal left him momentarily dizzy but significantly less drained than previous transformations had, evidence of his growing adaptation to Saiyan abilities. Kuroka approached, regarding him with newfound respect tinged with something more complicated. "Not bad, Saiyan boy. Not bad at all." She reached out to trace the outline of his jaw with one finger, her touch lingering. "I've officially decided. You're worth keeping an eye on." Before Issei could respond to this rather direct declaration of interest, Vados intervened smoothly. "The incursion is resolved, but this location is now compromised. We must return to the training dimension immediately." She turned to Kuroka. "Your assistance was valuable. You may accompany us if you wish to continue observing Issei's development." The offer, carefully phrased as acknowledgement rather than invitation, clearly pleased the Nekomata. Her tail swished with satisfaction as she stepped deliberately close to Issei. "I believe I will," she purred. After all, someone needs to make sure he doesn't spend all his time training and forget more essential aspects of his development. The implication hung in the air as Vados opened a return portal, her expression betraying nothing of her thoughts regarding this new dynamic. Issei, however, found himself responding on multiple levels to Kuroka's interest, part wariness, part curiosity, and part genuine appreciation for an ally who had proven both capable and, in her own way, trustworthy during combat. As they stepped through the portal, returning to the pocket dimension that had become his temporary home, Issei reflected on how dramatically his life had transformed. From ordinary devil pawn to awakened Saiyan warrior. From betrayed friend to dimensional anomaly worth hunting across realities. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges he could scarcely imagine. Yet for the first time since the betrayal had shattered his previous existence, Issei felt something beyond determination, beyond even purpose. He felt anticipation. The Saiyan warrior's hunger for growth, for challenge, for becoming something beyond current limitations. With Vados's guidance, Didrag's partnership, and now Kuroka's unexpected alliance, the journey had only just begun. And somewhere deep within, in the place where Saiyan blood and draconic power merged into something unprecedented, Issei Hyodo knew that his true transformation was still to come. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Power Unleashed. Again, Vados's command cut through the gravity chamber like a knife. Issei, drenched in sweat and trembling from exhaustion, forced himself to stand despite the crushing 50 times Earth gravity pressing down on every cell of his body. "I can't," he began, then caught himself. The phrase, "I can't," had been systematically eliminated from his vocabulary over the past 5 weeks of training. He drew a ragged breath, centering himself as Vados had taught him. "I need a different approach." Across the chamber, Kuroka lounged against a wall, somehow managing to look elegant despite the punishing gravitational force. As a yokai with natural energy manipulation abilities, she'd adapted to the training conditions with surprising ease. "The problem is obvious, NYA tilde," she called, golden eyes tracking Issei's movements with predatory interest. "You're still thinking like a devil, not a Saiyan. Devils conserve power. Saiyans embrace exhaustion. They grow stronger from pushing beyond their limits." Vados inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. "An accurate assessment. Saiyan physiology responds to extreme stress by initiating micro-adaptations at the cellular level. What feels like failure is actually the precursor to advancement." Issei wiped blood from the corner of his mouth. Considering their words, 5 weeks into his training, his body had transformed almost beyond recognition, lean muscle replacing the average physique he'd possessed before. Reflexes and senses sharpened to superhuman levels. Yet something still eluded him, the fullness of his Saiyan potential, the complete transformation he'd glimpsed during moments of extreme emotion. "Let me try something different," he decided, settling into a stance Vados had taught him for ki circulation. Instead of fighting against the crushing gravity directly, he began channeling energy through specific pathways in his body, reinforcing muscle groups sequentially rather than simultaneously. The technique required intense concentration, forcing him to visualize his own internal energy network with perfect clarity while maintaining physical control. Gradually, movement became possible, then easier, as his ki flowed more efficiently through his system. "Interesting approach," Vados observed, staff tapping rhythmically against the floor as she circled him. "You're adapting devil energy circulation principles to Saiyan ki distribution. Unconventional but potentially effective." Kuroka's ears perked up with interest as she observed the technique. "Clever," she murmured, "almost like senjutsu principles applied to an entirely different energy type." With renewed determination, Issei completed the training sequence, a complex combination of strikes, energy projections, and defensive maneuvers designed to tax every aspect of his developing abilities. Each movement flowed more naturally than the last as his body adapted to the technique, compensating for the crushing gravity through precision rather than raw power. When he finished the final form, standing perfectly balanced despite his exhaustion, Vados nodded in satisfaction. "Sufficient. You've demonstrated appropriate adaptive problem solving." She tapped her staff once, restoring normal gravity. Issei immediately dropped to one knee, muscles spasming as they adjusted to the sudden change. The transition from high gravity to normal had proven almost as challenging as the inverse, requiring rapid recalibration of strength and spatial awareness. "Your progress continues to exceed baseline projections," Vados noted, consulting energy readings that hovered around her staff. "However, we must address the central limitation in your development." Kuroka pushed herself away from the wall, stretching languidly as she approached. "He can't fully transform yet," she stated bluntly. "For all his power growth, he's still hitting a wall just below the threshold." Issei winced at the accurate assessment. Despite weeks of intensive training, his attempts to access the complete Super Saiyan transformation remained inconsistent. Flashes of golden hair and teal eyes, surges of extraordinary power, but never the sustained transformation Vados had described from Saiyan legends. "The partial transformations serve a purpose," Vados responded, helping Issei to his feet with a surprisingly gentle touch. "They allow his body to acclimate to the energy requirements gradually. A premature full transformation could cause cellular damage." "But I'm running out of time, aren't I?" Issei asked, voicing the concern that had been growing over their weeks together. "You said we had 3 months of relative time. We're more than halfway through that window." Vados didn't immediately contradict him, which was answer enough. Instead, she gestured toward the chamber's exit. "Clean yourself. Then join us in the observatory. There are developments we must discuss." As Issei limped toward the adjoining facilities, Kuroka fell into step beside him, her natural grace undiminished by the training session she'd participated in. Over the weeks, her presence had evolved from unexpected visitor to regular training partner, her yokai abilities providing valuable diversity in Issei's combat experience. "You're overthinking the transformation," she offered once they were out of Vados's earshot. "I've watched you for weeks now. Every time you get close, you become too analytical, trying to control the process instead of surrendering to it." Issei glanced at her, surprised by the insight. Beneath Kuroka's playful, often flirtatious exterior lay a keen intelligence and surprising depth of understanding about energy manipulation. Her own mastery of senjutsu represented years of disciplined practice, something easy to forget given her typically carefree demeanor. "Maybe," he acknowledged, "but control has been the whole point of this training. The first time I started transforming, I nearly leveled the entire clubroom without even trying." Kuroka's tail swished thoughtfully as they walked. "Control and surrender aren't opposites. You know, the highest forms of senjutsu require perfect discipline and complete release simultaneously." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a suggestive purr. "Rather like other pleasurable activities, nya. Despite weeks of exposure to her teasing, Issei still found himself blushing at the innuendo. His Saiyan physiology responded to her proximity with predictable interest, a biological reaction Vados had clinically explained as genetic compatibility recognition. To his surprise, these reactions had become less embarrassing and more intriguing as he'd grown more comfortable with his emerging Saiyan nature. "I'll keep that in mind," he managed, attempting to maintain composure. "Though somehow I doubt Vados would appreciate that particular training metaphor." Kuroka laughed, a sound like silver bells tinged with mischief. "Our elegant mentor sees more than she lets on. Why do you think she allows me to stay, despite my disruptive influence?" The question had actually crossed Issei's mind several times. Vados's training regimen was meticulously structured, every element carefully calculated to optimize his development. Kuroka's presence had initially seemed a potential complication, yet Vados had integrated the Nekomata into their routine with surprising accommodation. "I assumed it was because you provide useful training variety," Issei admitted. "That's part of it," Kuroka conceded, her expression turning momentarily serious. "But I suspect she recognizes something else, something about Saiyan nature that her clinical approach can't address." She tapped him lightly on the chest. "Saiyans aren't just warriors, from what I've gathered. They're a passionate race, emotional, instinctual, aspects of development that might require different teaching methods than our stoic mentor provides." The insight was unexpectedly perceptive, suggesting Kuroka had been analyzing their situation with far more attention than her casual demeanor implied. Before Issei could pursue this line of thought, they reached the cleansing chamber, an advanced facility that used energy fields rather than water to remove impurities and accelerate physical recovery. "We'll continue this conversation later," Kuroka promised with a wink, before sauntering toward the adjacent female facilities. "Don't keep us waiting too long in the observatory. I suspect today's developments are more significant than our mentor is letting on." Issei watched her depart, reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed. 6 weeks ago, his existence had revolved around the occult research club, his devotion to Rias, and his dream of becoming a high-ranking devil. Now he trained in an interdimensional pocket realm, guided by a mysterious celestial being, alongside a powerful yokai who had once been an enemy. Most significantly, he was no longer simply the Red Dragon Emperor, he was the inheritor of an ancient warrior race's legacy, carrying potential that transcended his previous understanding of power. The betrayal that had catalyzed these changes remained a wound not fully healed, but increasingly, it felt like a necessary rupture, the breaking of a shell that had confined him to a smaller existence than he was meant for. "Your perspective evolves, partner," Diedreg observed from within. "You're beginning to think like a being of TRUE power, seeing setbacks as pathways rather than obstacles. Is that a Saiyan trait or a dragon one?" Issei asked silently as he stepped into the cleansing field, feeling the immediate relief as energy waves penetrated sore muscles. "Accelerating recovery." "Neither and both," the ancient dragon replied. "It is simply the wisdom that comes when one recognizes their own capacity for transformation. Something I have observed in the greatest wielders of the boosted gear throughout history." Issei considered this as the cleansing process completed, leaving him refreshed and partially recovered. He donned the training attire Vados had provided, clothing specifically designed to accommodate his power fluctuations while providing optimal movement freedom. When he arrived at the observatory several minutes later, he immediately sensed the change in atmosphere. The normally serene space, a domed chamber with transparent walls revealing the cosmic void beyond their pocket dimension, crackled with subtle tension. Vados stood at the central platform, manipulating complex energy diagrams that hovered in 3 dimensions around her. Kuroka observed from a short distance, her playfulness replaced by uncharacteristic focus as she studied the patterns. Right on time, Vados acknowledged without looking up from her work. We have received intelligence that requires immediate attention. Issei joined them at the platform, studying the energy signatures displayed in the holographic projection. Unlike the training diagnostics he'd grown familiar with, these patterns showed dimensional disture. Bounces on a much larger scale, ripples and convergences spanning multiple reality layers. What am I looking at? He asked, recognizing Earth at the center of the display, surrounded by overlapping fields of energy distortion. Dimensional transit patterns, Vados explained, expanding a particular section. Following your encounter with the Void Trackers, we anticipated increased interest in your energy signature from various factions. What we did not predict was the specific entity now approaching. She highlighted a particular energy trail, distinctive for its golden-white signature and unusual movement pattern, cutting directly through dimensional boundaries that should have required specialized transit nodes. This energy, Issei studied it carefully, feeling a strange resonance within himself, as if some part of him recognized the approaching presence on an instinctual level. Saiyan, Kuroka confirmed, her sensitive energy detection abilities allowing her to identify the pattern. Pure Saiyan, unlike your hybrid signature, and powerful, extraordinarily so. Vados nodded. Correct. We are detecting a full-blooded Saiyan approaching Earth's dimensional boundary. Estimated arrival within 48 hours. The revelation stunned Issei into momentary silence. Throughout his training, he had come to terms with the idea that he carried Saiyan heritage, a diluted bloodline passed down through generations. But he had internalized Vados's explanation that pure Saiyans were extinct in this dimension, scattered across the multiverse after their homeworld's destruction. I thought you said there weren't any full Saiyans in this dimension, he finally managed, looking to Vados for explanation. In this dimension, correct, she clarified. However, the approaching entity Y originates from Universe 6 in the primary dimensional array, a parallel reality where a small Saiyan population survived on a planet called Sadala. She adjusted the display to show the entity's Rand's dimensional journey, a direct path cutting through barriers that should have been impermeable. Normal travel between these universal boundaries requires specialized pathways maintained by dimensional administrators. This Saiyan, however, appears to be utilizing an experimental transit method that bypasses standard protocols. Highly irregular and potentially destabilizing to the dimensional fabric. But why come here? Issei pressed, struggling to process the implications. Why now? Kuroka's ears twitched as she reached a conclusion. They sensed you, she stated with sudden certainty. Your awakening, your power growth, it created ripples strong enough to attract attention from across dimensional boundaries. Vados inclined her head in agreement. A logical assessment. When you CCS'd higher levels of Saiyan power during training and combat, the energy signature created distinctive patterns recognizable to those familiar with Saiyan Ki. She manipulated the display to show how Issei's energy fluctuations during training had created resonance patterns extending far beyond their pocket dimension, despite her considerable shielding efforts. It seems our visitor has been searching for something, or someone, with Saiyan energy. Your emergence presented an unexpected beacon. Issei ran a hand through his hair, processing this development. So, another Saiyan is coming. Is that good or bad? Unknown. Vados admitted, rare uncertainty in her tone. Saiyans from Universe 6 evolved differently than those of Universe 7, less individually aggressive, more societally structured. However, this particular individual appears to be operating independently, outside official channels. Meaning they could be anything from a curious explorer to a rogue warrior, Kuroka translated, her tails swishing with agitation. Wonderful. Issei studied the approaching energy signature more carefully. Something about it felt distinctive. Not just powerful, but somehow Familiar despite his never having encountered a pure-blooded Saiyan before. Do we know anything else about them? Gender, age, intentions. Vados adjusted the readings, extracting additional data from the energy patterns. Limited biological information can be inferred from the key signature. Female, young adult by Saiyan standards, likely between 80 and 100 Earth years, though Saiyans maintain physical prime for extended periods compared to humans. She frowned slightly, an unusual expression on her typically composed features. Power level, considerable, beyond your current capabilities, even with the boosted gears enhancement. The assessment landed heavily. Despite weeks of intensive training, Issei's power had grown exponentially, yet apparently remained insufficient against a full-blooded Saiyan warrior. So what's our plan? He asked, determination replacing concern. Continue training and hope I advance enough to match her in 48 hours. Not precisely, Vados replied, dismissing the display with a gesture. This development necessitates accelerated progression and strategic recalibration. We will relocate temporarily to Earth, establishing a controlled environment for the encounter. Wait, Kuroka interjected, surprise evident in her voice. We're going back to Earth. To meet this Saiyan intentionally. Avoidance serves no strategic purpose. Vados explained with characteristic logic. The visitor can sense Issei's energy signature regardless of our dimensional shielding. Better to control the circumstances of their meeting than allow random encounter in potentially populated areas. She turned to Issei, her expression serious. Additionally, there is another matter that requires your attention before this Saiyan arrives, one I had intended to address later in your training, but circumstances now demand acceleration. What matter? Issei asked, sensing the gravity in her tone. Your family, Vados stated simply. Specifically, your mother. The unexpected direction caught Issei completely off guard. Throughout the intensive training, he'd had minimal contact with the outside world. Vados had established a temporal display cement field that allowed his extended absence to register as only a few days in Earth time, with a simple cover story about intensive training with a new mentor. My mother, he repeated, confusion evident. What does she have to do with any of this? Vados exchanged a meaningful glance with Kuroka before responding. Your Saiyan heritage comes directly through your maternal line. Your mother Ari's stronger Saiyan genetic markers than typical for a third-generation descendant. What are you saying? Issei demanded, an uncomfortable suspicion forming. Your mother is more aware of her heritage than we initially believed. Vados clarified. Recent energy scans of your family residence reveal carefully concealed key signatures consistent with deliberate suppression techniques, methods K. Known primarily to those with conscious knowledge of their abilities. The revelation struck Issei like a physical blow. His mother, his ordinary, kind, completely normal mother who worked as a hospita administrator, had been concealing knowledge of their Saiyan heritage. The idea seemed absurd, yet Vados had never given him reason to doubt her assessments. That's impossible, he stammered. I would have known if my mom was. If she could what? Use ki, manifest superhuman abilities? Kuroka asked gently, her typical teasing absent as she recognized the emotional impact of the revelation. People hide their true nature all the time, Issei. Some of us because we're hunted, others because we simply wish to live normal lives. Vados nodded in agreement. Recent energy fluctuations around your family home suggest your mother has detected your power growth despite our dimensional shielding. She has begun actively scanning, using techniques that indicate formal training, not mere instinct. Issei sank into a nearby seat, mind racing as he reevaluated countless memories through this new lens. Had there been signs he'd missed? Moments when his mother had demonstrated unusual abilities or knowledge that should have hinted at her true nature. I need to see her, he decided, looking up at Vados with determination. I need to ask her directly. Precisely my assessment, Vados agreed. Before we confront the approaching Saiyan, you must resolve this family matter. Knowledge of your heritage, complete knowledge, may prove critical in the coming encounter. She gestured, and the observatory began shifting, rearranging into a transit chamber. We will depart immediately for Earth. I have identified an isolated location for establishing our base of operations. A mountain property in the Japanese Alps, sufficiently remote yet accessible to Kuo town. Kuroka moved to stand beside Issei, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "I'll come with you," she offered. Then added with a hint of her usual playfulness, "Someone needs to keep you from destroying half the countryside if things get emotional." Despite the situation's gravity, Issei found himself appreciating her attempt at normalcy. "Thanks," he managed, genuinely grateful for her presence. Over the weeks of training together, Kuroka had evolved from unexpected ally to something approaching a friend, albeit one with frequently blurred boundaries and unpredictable motives. As Vados completed the transit preparations, creating a dimensional corridor that would deposit them directly at their Earth destination, Issei steeled himself for what lay ahead. The confrontation with his mother about their shared heritage. The arrival of a full-blooded Saiyan with unknown intentions. The continued challenge of mastering his own transformative abilities. Each represented a significant challenge independently. Together, they formed a convergence point that would likely define not just his development as a Saiyan warrior, but his understanding of his own identity. "Ready yourselves," Vados announced, staff glowing with gathering power. Dimensional transit initiating. The familiar sensati on of reality shifting around them enveloped Issei as they departed the pocket dimension that had been his home and training ground for weeks. As the transit completed, depositing them in a clearing surrounded by dense alpine forest, he took his first breath of earth air in what felt subjectively like months. The mountain landscape stretched around them, pristine and isolated. A traditional Japan Issei structure stood nearby, a large wooden building that somehow managed to appear both ancient and perfectly maintained, surrounded by stone walls and carefully tended gardens. "Our operational base," Vados explained, gesturing toward the building, "a property existing in dimensional overlap, partially in the human realm, partially in the yokai realm. Ideal for our purposes." "I know this place," Kuroka commented, surprise evident in her voice. "This is one of the old yokai sanctuaries from before the faction wars. They're supposed to be sealed to outsiders." Vados inclined her head slightly. "I have historical connections with various dimensional administrators. The property has been temporarily allocated for our use." Before further discussion could develop, Issei sensed a IAR presence approaching rapidly from the direction of Kuo town, moving at speeds no ordinary human could achieve, following what appeared to be a direct tracking path toward their location. "We have company," he warned, dropping instinctively into a defensive stance. Vados remained unperturbed. "Expected company," she clarified. "The Valkyrie has been monitoring energy fluctuations in this region for some time. Our arrival would naturally trigger her investigative protocols." "Valkyrie," Issei repeated, momentarily confused before understanding dawned. "Wait, Rosweiss." As if summoned by her name, a figure descended from the sky above the clearing, silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sunlight, magical circles swirling around her as she maintained a battle-ready posture. Rosweiss, former bodyguard to Odin and fellow member of the Occult Research Club, landed gracefully several meters away, her expression a mixture of surprise and wariness as she recognized Issei. "Hyodo-kun?" she asked, clearly struggling to reconcile his significantly altered appearance with the student she remembered. "Is that really you?" Issei straightened from his defensive stance, offering a somewhat awkward wave. "Hey, Rosweiss-san, this is probably not how you expected to find me." The Valkyrie's gaze shifted rapidly between Issei, Kuroka, and Vados, assessing potential threat levels with professional efficiency. Her attention lingered particularly on Vados, whose otherworldly nature would be immediately apparent to anyone with Rosweiss's magical sensitivity. "Your disappearance has caused considerable concern," Rosweiss stated carefully, maintaining a respectful distance. "Rias Grimori reported you had left for special training, but your energy signature vanished completely. Then 3 days ago, unusual power fluctuations began emanating from your family home." She gestured toward Kuroka with evident suspicion. "And now you reappear in the company of an SS-class stray devil and an entity I cannot classify within any known supernatural taxonomy." Vados stepped forward, staff held vertically in a deliberately non-threatening posture. "Your caution is appropriate, V. Valkyrie Rosweiss of the Norse Pantheon. I am Vados, attendant to Lord Champa, god of destruction for Universe 6. The formal introduction clearly meant nothing to Rosweiss, whose confusion only deepened at the unfamiliar titles. Universe 6. God of Destruction. These designations are not recognized in any mythological classification system I've studied. They wouldn't be, Issei explained, attempting to diffuse the tension. Vados is from, well, beyond our dimension. She's been training me since I discovered some unexpected aspects of my heritage. Rosweiss's attention returned to him, her analytical mind clearly cataloging the changes in his appearance and energy signature. Your power has changed fundamentally, she observed. Not just increased, but transformed. You're not simply a devil hosting the boosted gear anymore. That's a long story, Issei admitted. One I'm still figuring out myself. Kuroka, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet during the exchange, finally spoke up. The short version, Valkyrie, is that our favorite perverted devil turned out to be carrying the bloodline of an extinct warrior race from another dimension. Quite the plot twist, NYA. Despite the situation's tension, Issei found himself suppressing a smile at Kuroka's irreverent summary. Even Vados's expression softened marginally, suggesting she wasn't entirely immune to the Nekomata's disarming approach. Rosweiss, however, maintained professional composure. I was assigned to monitor unusual energy patterns in this region following the incident at Kuo Academy. If you're responsible for these disturbances, I am obligated to report your presence to Asgard. Your loyalty to your pantheon is commendable, Vados acknowledged. However, the situation extends beyond factional interests. What happens in the coming days may impact multiple dimensional boundaries, including the 9 realms your faction monitors. Something in Vados's tone, the quiet certainty, why of someone speaking with vast authority, gave Rosweiss pause. She studied the celestial being more carefully, apparently recognizing power far beyond her experience. Explain, she requested, her stance relaxing slightly though her guard remained evident. Vados gestured, creating a simplified version of the observatory display, showing Earth at the center of converging dimensional disturbances. With the approaching Saiyan energy signature highlighted. A being of considerable power approaches this dimension, she explained. One connected to Issei Hyodo's newly awakened heritage. Their arrival may draw additional interdimensional attention to Earth, attention from entities beyond conventional supernatural factions' experience or containment capabilities. Rosweiss studied the display with the focused intensity of a scholar presented with unprecedented data. These energy patterns, they don't conform to any classification system I've studied. Not angelic, demonic, divine, or primordial. Saiyan energy, Issei supplied. Apparently, I'm part of a warrior race called Saiyans. My heritage recently activated, which is what happened at the academy that day. Understanding dawned in Rosweiss's eyes. The explosive power surge that damaged the old school building. That was you. Her expression shifted as pieces connected. Rias claimed it was a training accident, but the energy residue was unlike anything I'd encountered before. Issei's jaw tightened at the mention of Rias's explanation, another lie to cover the betrayal. It wasn't a training accident, he stated flatly. But that's not important right now. What matters is that another Saiyan is coming, a full-blooded one, apparently, and we need to prepare. Rosweiss considered this information with remarkable adaptability, her analytical mind already processing strategic implications. If this approaching entity possesses power comparable to what you demonstrated at the academy, but more controlled and deliberate. She frowned. The potential for catastrophic damage is considerable. Which is why we've established this base of operations, Vados confirmed. To manage the encounter under controlled conditions. Away from population centers. After a moment's consideration, Rosweiss nodded decisively. I should remain as observer. Asgard will require direct intelligence rather than second-hand reports of such a significant interdimensional event. The declaration, while phrased as professional necessity, carried undertones Issei recognized from their previous interactions. Rosweiss's genuine concern for the welfare of others, particularly students under her care as a teacher at Kuo Academy. We welcome your presence, Vados stated formally. Your perspective may prove valuable, particularly regarding how traditional supernatural factions might respond to these developments. With the immediate tension resolved, Issei returned to their more pressing concern. I need to see my mother, he reminded Vados. Before the Saiyan arrives. Agreed. Vados turned to Kuroka and Rosweiss. While Issei addresses his family matters, perhaps you could assist in establishing appropriate defensive measures around the property. The Valkyrie's runic expertise combined with yokai boundary techniques would create effective containment fields. The delegation of responsibility was clearly designed to give Issei privacy for the coming conversation while keeping the others productively occupied, a diplomatic solution that addressed multiple needs simultaneously. "You'll go alone?" Kuroka asked Issei, genuine concern evident beneath her typically playful demeanor. "This is something I need to do myself," he confirmed, though the prospect of confronting his mother about their shared heritage filled him with apprehension. "Family business." Vados approached, offering him a small communication device of unfamiliar design. "This will allow you to contact us immediately if needed. I've also prepared an energy suppression technique to mask your approach. Your power level might otherwise alert your mother prematurely." She demonstrated the technique, a subtle modification to his key circulation that would reduce his energy signature to near-human levels without compromising his abilities. Issei mastered it after several attempts, feeling the strange sensation of his power folding inward, becoming almost imperceptible to external detection. "Your mother's work schedule indicates she should be arriving home approximately 1 hour from now," Vados informed him. "I sug. Saint you position yourself there before her arrival." Issei nodded, grateful for the practical information. "I'll head there now. Should be back before nightfall, one way or another." As he prepared to depart, Rosweiss approached, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Hyodo-kun," she began, uncharacteristic hesitation in her voice. "Whatever happened at the academy that day, if you need someone to talk to who wasn't directly involved." The offer, awkwardly delivered but genuinely meant, caught Issei by surprise. Of all the members of the Occult Research Club, Rosweiss had been perhaps the least close to him, their interactions limited primarily to group activities and her occasional exasperated reactions to his perverted tendencies. "Thanks, Rosweiss-san," he responded, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Maybe when I get back." With a final nod to Vados and Kuroka, Issei channeled ki through his system and launched himself skyward, the ability to fly under his own power still a source of exhilaration despite weeks of practice. As he accelerated toward Kuo town, he reflected on how dramatically his life had transformed. The journey to his family home took only minutes at his enhanced speed. The familiar suburban neighborhood appearing below as he descended in a secluded area several blocks away to avoid unwanted attention. Activating the energy suppression technique, he approached on foot, feeling strangely nervous as the modest 2-story house came into view. It had been weeks from his perspective since he'd been home, though barely 5 days had passed in real-world time thanks to Vados's dimensional manipulation. Would his parents have noticed changes in him? How exactly did one begin a conversation about interdimensional warrior heritage with a mother who had apparently been concealing her own abilities for decades? Taking a deep breath, Issei used his house key to enter quietly through the side door. The familiar scents and sounds of me washed over him, comforting yet somehow distant, as if belonging to a life he'd already outgrown. "I'm home," he called out, listening for response. His father's voice answered from the living room. "Issei, you're back early. Your mother should be home soon," she called to say she was leaving work a bit ahead of schedule. Issei found his father relaxing in his usual armchair, newspaper in hand. The picture of ordinary domestic contentment. Goro Hyodo looked up with a welcoming smile that faltered slightly as he registered the changes in his son's appearance. "You've changed your hairstyle," he offered uncertainly, clearly struggling to identify exactly what was different about Issei beyond a general sense of transformation. "Something like that," Issei replied, settling into the sofa across from him. "Training's been pretty intense." His father nodded sagely, accepting the explanation with characteristic good nature. "Well, it seems to be working. You look stronger, more confident." The simple observation, delivered with paternal pride, unexpectedly tightened Issei's throat. Despite everything he'd learned about his heritage, the complicated revelations about his mother's potential knowledge, his father remained exactly as he had always been, supportive, unassuming, and genuinely proud of his son regardless of circumstances. "Dad," Issei began carefully, "has Mom ever seemed unusual to you?" "I mean, Has she ever done things that seemed impossible, or known things she shouldn't have been able to know? His father's expression shifted to one of mild confusion. What an odd question. Your mother is certainly exceptional, smarter than she lets on, stronger than she looks. But unusual, he chuckled fondly. Well, I suppose every husband finds mysteries in his wife even after decades together. The response was affectionate but revealed nothing useful. Either his father genuinely didn't know about his wife's Saiyan heritage, or he was remarkably skilled at deflection. Neither would surprise Issei at this point. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. I'm home, called a familiar voice, his mother, Miki Hyodo, arriving exactly as Vados had predicted. We're in the living room, his father called back. Look who's returned from his training trip. Footsteps approached, and Issei rose to his feet, strangely nay. Arvu as his mother appeared in the doorway. She looked exactly as he remembered, a woman in her early 40s with gentle features, wearing a simple business suit from her work at the hospital administration office. Yet now, with his enhanced Saiyan senses, Issei detected subtle details he'd never noticed before, the perfect balance in her posture, the controlled efficiency of her movements, and most tellingly, the carefully regulated energy signature that would appear entirely human to casual observation but revealed distinctive patterns to those who knew what to look for. Issei, she exclaimed. I ammed with what appeared to be genuine delight. You're back early. How was? She stopped abruptly as she truly looked at him, her eyes widening fractionally as she registered the changes. Not just physical differences, the increased muscle definition, the altered stance, but the energy signature he knew she could sense despite his suppression technique. For a moment that stretched like eternity, mother and son simply stared at each other, an unspoken recognition passing between them. Honey, she addressed her husband without taking her eyes off Issei, would you mind picking up something special for dinner to celebrate Issei's return? Maybe that sukiyaki he likes from the place across town. The transparent attempt to create privacy might have amused Issei under different circumstances. His father, apparently oblivious to the sudden tension, agreed cheerfully and departed with domestic enthusiasm, leaving mother and son alone in a silence heavy with unspoken revelations. The moment the front door closed behind him, Miki Hyodo's demeanor changed subtly but significantly, her carefully maintained facade of ordinary motherhood sliding away to reveal something sharper, more alert, more warrior-like. How long have you known? She asked quietly, her voice carrying none of its usual gentle cadence. About being part Saiyan. A few weeks, Issei answered directly, seeing no point in pretense. About you knowing. About an hour. His mother sighed, moving to close the living room curtains with deliberate care before turning back to face him fully. I always wondered if it would manifest in you. The blood has thinned with each generation. Your grandmother showed only minimal signs, and you displayed none throughout childhood. Until recently, Issei supplied. She nodded, studying him with new intensity. Something triggered the awakening, something powerful enough to activate dormant genetic expressions that should have remained recessive. Her eyes narrowed slightly. The Red Dragon Emperor. That's what changed, isn't it? Somehow you became the host for a sacred gear powerful enough to catalyze the Saiyan heritage. The accuracy of her assessment stunned Issei. Not only did his mother know about their Saiyan lineage, but she also possessed knowledge of sacred gears and supernatural mechanics that no ordinary human should have. How do you know about sacred gears? He demanded. How long have you been, whatever you are? I've always been what I am, she replied with unexpected directness. A quarter-blooded Saiyan living in a world that knows nothing of our kind. As for sacred gears, she smiled faintly. The supernatural world isn't as separate from the human one as most beings believe. Those of us with the senses to perceive it learn what we need to survive. She gestured toward the kitchen. This conversation requires tea, and probably food. Your energy levels suggest you've been training intensively. Your metabolism must be in overdrive. Without waiting for response, she led the way to the kitchen, moving with a grace and precision Issei now recognized as characteristic of trained warriors. As she prepared tea with efficient movements, he noticed details that had always been present but never registered, the calluses on her hands that didn't match her administrative job, the controlled breathing techniques she employed automatically. The perfect awareness of her surroundings without visual confirmation. How could I never have noticed? He wondered aloud. His mother smiled sadly as she placed a steaming cup before him, along with an assortment of high-protein snacks that appeared with suspicious readiness. Because I worked very hard to ensure you wouldn't. Protection through normality, the strategy my mother taught me, as her mother taught her. She settled across from him, her posture perfect yet relaxed, the stance of someone who had spent decades mastering physical discipline. Our family has survived by blending in, by suppressing our heritage rather than embracing it. The alternative, she shook her head, the alternative was to become targets, specimens, weapons. Issei absorbed this as he automatically began consuming the offered food, his Saiyan metabolism responding eagerly despite his emotional turmoil. But why keep it from me? Even after I became a devil, joined Rias's peerage, you must have known I was involved in the supernatural world. Of course I knew, she replied with unexpected sharpness. I've monitored your energy signature since birth. The moment it transformed with devil energy, She paused, regaining her composure. I nearly intervened. But you seem to have found a place, protection, purpose. The devil girl's aura suggested genuine care, at least initially. The qualifier wasn't lost on Issei. At least initially. His mother's expression hardened, until she attempted to extract your awakening Saiyan power by force. Yes, I sensed that too. The energy disruption was impossible to miss. By the time I prepared to intervene, you had already handled the situation. The clinical description of his explosive transformation and departure almost drew a bitter laugh from Issei. Handled, hardly captured the chaos and heartbreak of that moment. After that, his mother continued, your energy signature vanished completely, not dead, but beyond my ability to track. Then recently, I began detecting power fluctuations consistent with Saiyan training techniques. I assumed you'd found someone knowledgeable about our heritage. Vados, Issei confirmed. She's not from around here. Clearly, his mother noted dryly. Her energy doesn't register as anything within my considerable classification experience. The casual revelation of hers, considerable classification experience, with supernatural energies raised countless questions, but Issei focused on the most immediate. What can you tell me about our family? About where we came from? Vados explained the basics about Saiyans and planet Vegeta, but I want to know our specific history. Mickey considered him thoughtfully before rising and gesturing for him to follow. She led him upstairs to the master bedroom, then to a concealed panel in the closet wall that Issei had never noticed despite living in the house his entire life. With practiced movements, she disengaged multiple hidden security measures before revealing a recessed safe. Your father knows nothing about this, she explained as she worked through the complex unlocking sequence. Not because I don't trust him, but because knowledge itself can be dangerous in a world where mind-reading entities exist. The safe opened to reveal not valuables or weapons, but a collection of carefully preserved documents, photographs, and what appeared to be technological components of unfamiliar design. She removed a weathered journal bound in material Issei didn't recognize and a small metal case. Your great-grandmother's journal, she explained, handling the book with reverence. Kaori arrived on Earth as an infant, the only survivor of a scout ship sent from planet Vegeta shortly before its destruction. Her escape was no accident. Her parents were among the few Saiyans who heeded the warnings about Frieza's intentions. Issei accepted the journal with care, feeling a strange connection to the object, a direct link to his Saiyan ancestry. The writing inside was in Japanese, but occasionally interspersed with unfamiliar characters that he somehow recognized as Saiyan script despite never having seen it before. And this, his mother continued, opening the metal case to reveal what appeared to be a data storage device and a small pendant, contains the last message from her parents, along with technical specifications for Saiyan training methodologies. The pendant is a royal house identification marker. Apparently, your great-grandmother's family had distant connections to the ruling bloodline. The revelations came almost too quickly to process. Not just Saiyan heritage, but potential royal lineage, however distant. Technology and knowledge deliberately preserved through generations. Ily's secret maintained with military precision. You were trained, Issei realized, studying his mother with new understanding. Not just in suppressing your abilities, but in using them when necessary. She nodded, a hint of pride breaking through her composed exterior. My grandmother, your great-grandmother, believed that hiding should never mean helplessness. She trained my mother, who trained me, in controlled application of what limited Saiyan abilities manifested in our diluted bloodline. Primarily enhanced strength, accelerated healing, and basic ki manipulation. She demonstrated by extending her palm, where a small sphere of golden energy materialized, nowhere near the power Issei could now generate, but unmistakably Saiyan ki, perfectly controlled. I never manifested enough power to be detected by supernatural factions, she explained as she extinguished the energy sphere. But I maintained enough to protect our family if necessary. Issei stared at his mother with new eyes, seeing beyond the gentle hospital administrator to the disciplined warrior beneath, a woman who had carried ancient knowledge through decades of secrecy. But now everything's changed, he stated, not quite a question. She studied him with unmistakable maternal concern beneath her warrior's composure. Your power already exceeds anything in our family's recorded history. Whatever catalyzed you, our awakening has connected you to potential far beyond what should be possible with our diluted bloodline. Her expression turned grave. And now something approaches, something I sensed 3 days ago. Something with pure Saiyan energy. You felt that too, Issei confirmed, impressed despite himself with his mother's sensitivity. A female Saiyan from another universe, according to Vados. We don't know her intentions yet. His mother's expression sharpened with alarm. Another universe. Issei, what exactly have you become involved with? Interdimensional entities, pure-blooded Saiyans, these G.O. far beyond the supernatural factions have monitored for decades. The genuine concern in her voice reminded Issei that for all her hidden abilities and secret knowledge, she was still his mother, a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting him, even if her methods had involved concealing his heritage. I'm still figuring that out myself, he admitted. But I'm not alone. Vados has been training me, helping me understand and control these abilities. And there are others, allies who know about my heritage and still stand with me. Something in his tone must have conveyed more than his words. Because his mother's eyes narrowed perceptively. These allies, they include more than just your mentor, don't they? A knowing smile touched her lips. Your pheromone profile has shifted. Saiyan maturation indicators are active. What? Issei stammered, heat rising to his face as he realized what his mother was detecting with her enhanced senses. She laughed. A genuine, warm sound. That momentarily bridged the gap between the warrior she had revealed herself to be and the mother he had always known. Saiyan biology is remarkably responsive to compatible potential mates, especially during power awakening phases. Your great-grandmother's journal contains quite detailed information about Saiyan reproductive behaviors and mate selection instincts. Issei groaned, covering his face with his hands. Please tell me we're not having this conversation. We absolutely are, his mother countered with unexpected firmness. Because unlike human adolescents, young Saiyans experiencing attraction generate energy fluctuations that can be detected by others of their kind, including our approaching visitor. Her expression grew serious once more, which may complicate an already unpredictable situation. The practical concern cut through Issei's embarrassment, bringing him back to their immediate challenge. What should we do? About the approaching Saiyan, I mean. His mother considered the question carefully, closing the hidden safe and returning the room to its ordinary appearance before responding. We prepare, we gather information, and most importantly, we determine whether this visitor represents threat or opportunity. She studied him with evaluating eyes, not just a mother's gaze but a warrior's assessment. Your power has grown remarkably, but your control suggests formal training. Show me what you've learned. The request, delivered with calm authority, triggered an automatic response in Issei, a student's instinct to demonstrate progress to a respected teacher. Without conscious thought, he settled into the primary stance Vados had drilled into him for weeks, allowing his ki to flow naturally through established pathways. Golden energy manifested around him in a controlled aura, not the explosive power of his partial transformations, but the disciplined application of Saiyan energy Vados had emphasized as the foundation for all advanced techniques. His mother observed with critical precision, circling him slowly. Remarkable, she murmured. Your ki pathways are fully developed, something that should be impossible with our diluted bloodline. And the quality of your energy. She extended her senses further, her eyes widening as she detected the full extent of his potential. "You're approaching transformation threshold," she stated with certainty. "The legendary state our family records describe but considered mythical for those with mixed heritage." "Super Saiyan," Issei confirmed. "I've reached partial transformation during extreme emotional states. But I can't maintain or control it yet." His mother stopped directly before him, meeting his gaze with unexpected intensity. "Because you're approaching it incorrectly," she stated with absolute certainty. "The records are clear on this point. Super Saiyan transformation isn't achieved through technique or practice, it emerges when necessity aligns with identity." "Identity," Issei repeated, confused. "Who you truly are," she clarified. "Not who you think you should be, or what others expect you to become. The transformation responds to authentic self-expression under extreme necessity." She placed a hand on his shoulder, a mother's touch, yet carrying a warrior's understanding. "You're holding part of yourself back, aren't you? Still trying to be what you were before, instead of fully embracing what you're becoming." The insight struck with uncomfortable accuracy. Despite weeks of intensive training, Issei had indeed maintained certain mental reservations, parts of his identity he'd clung to from his previous life, conceptual limitations about who and what he could become. "I don't know how to let go," he admitted quietly. "Every time I get close to full transformation, something inside resists, like I'm afraid of what I'll become if I surrender completely." His mother nodded with understanding. "The fear is natural. Our family has survived by controlling, suppressing, limiting. But your path clearly requires the opposite approach." She smiled sadly. "Perhaps that's why the knowledge found you now, because the world is changing, and survival through hiding may no longer be viable." The sound of the front door opening interrupted their conversation, his father returning with the promised dinner. With practiced efficiency, his mother deactivated the subtle energy field she had apparently maintained around the room during their conversation. "We'll continue this discussion later," she promised, her demeanor shifting seamlessly back to the mother he had always known. "For now, let's enjoy dinner as a family. Your father deserves that much normalcy, at least." As they descended the stairs together, Issei found himself viewing his family home, his entire life, through transformed understanding. The ordinary suburban existence he had taken for granted had been a carefully maintained facade, a protective shell constructed by generations of Saiyan descendants hiding in plain sight. Dinner passed with surprising normalcy, his father chattering about neighborhood happenings and work developments, blissfully unaware of the seismic revelations that had just transpired. His mother maintained her perfect performance as an ordinary housewife, though Issei now recognized the subtle signs of her warrior training in every movement. As the evening concluded, Issei prepared to return to the mountain base, explaining to his parents that his training retreat required him to stay on site. His father accepted this with typical good nature, while his mother communicated silent understanding of the real situation. As he prepared to leave, his mother pressed the small metal case containing his great-grandmother's data storage device and royal pendant into his hands. "Take these," she insisted quietly. "They belong with the family member who can truly fulfill their purpose." The gesture carried unmistakable significance, not just sharing family artifacts, but acknowledging Issei's emergence as the culmination of their bloodline's potential after generations of necessary suppression. "I'll protect our family," he promised as they embarked. The words carrying deeper meaning than such a statement would have held weeks earlier. "I know you will," she replied with quiet confidence. "But remember, being Saiyan isn't just about power or combat. Our ancestors were survivors, adapters, evolvers. Their greatest strength wasn't destruction but transformation, the ability to become what circumstances required without losing their essential nature." The advice resonated deeply as Issei departed, taking to the sky once clear of the neighborhood. As he soared toward the mountain base, the family revelations settled into place alongside his weeks of training under Vados, completing connections in his understanding of his heritage and identity. By the time he landed at the mountain sanctuary, night had fallen completely, the property illuminated by subtle key lanterns that responded to authorized energy signatures. He found Vados, Kuroka, and Rossweiss gathered in the main building's central chamber, reviewing defensive preparations. "How did it go?" Kuroka asked immediately, her usual playfulness subdued by genuine concern. "Better than expected," Issei replied, settling beside them and carefully placing his great-grandmother's artifacts on the table. My mother knew everything, has always known. Turns out I come from a line of Saiyans who've been deliberately hiding their heritage for generations. He explained the revelations about his family history, his mother's training, and the preserved knowledge passed down since his great-grandmother's arrival on Earth. Vados examined the data storage device with particular interest, apparently recognizing its technological origin. Saiyan archival technology, she confirmed. Primitive by current standards but remarkably durable. The information contained may provide valuable context for your specific genetic expression patterns. Your mother maintained complete secrecy despite possessing supernatural abilities, Rossweiss observed, professional admiration evident in her tone. That level of energy suppression requires exceptional discipline, particularly around beings with enhanced senses like devils and yokai. 3 generations of practice, Issei explained. They developed techniques specifically for avoiding detection by supernatural factions. Smart family, Kuroka commented, examining the royal pendant with curious fingers. Though hiding seems like such a waste of Saiyan potential, even diluted, it was necessary for survival, Vados noted. Entities with unique energy signatures frequently become targets for collection, experimentation, or weaponization across dimensions. Your mother's family chose security through obscurity, a valid strategic choice under the circumstances. The discussion continued well into the night, integrating his new information into their preparations for the approaching Saiyan visitor. According to Vados's latest calculations, arrival was now expected within 24 hours, considerably accelerated from the previous estimate. The visitor appears to have detected your energy signature more precisely following your family encounter, Vados explained, displaying updated tracking data. The emotional resonance of reconnecting with your bloodline created distinctive patterns that may have served as a more effective beacon. Great, Issei sighed. So my family reunion basically sent up a flare saying, "Saiyan here, come find me." Essentially correct, Vados confirmed without irony. However, this acceleration provides strategic advantages. We can control the encounter parameters more effectively with our preparations already in place. The discussion turned to practical considerations, defensive perimeters, power containment fields, contingency plans for various encounter scenarios. Rossweiss proved unexpectedly valuable, her Valkyrie training offering specialized knowledge about containing beings of extraordinary power through runic arrays. As the planning session concluded in the early morning hours, Issei found himself drawn to the property's exterior meditation garden, a perfectly arranged space designed for energy cultivation and reflection. The approaching encounter weighed heavily on his mind. Not with fear but with a strange anticipation he recognized as his Saiyan heritage responding to potential challenge. To his surprise, Kuroka joined him in the garden, her usual playful demeanor subdued by the night's quiet solemnity. They sat together on a stone bench overlooking a small reflection pool, comfortable silence stretching between them. "Your mother gave you something besides those artifacts, didn't she?" Kuroka finally asked, her perceptiveness once again catching Issei off guard. "Something less tangible but more important." He glanced at her, impressed by her insight. "Perspective," he acknowledged. "About transformation. About why I can't reach full Super Saiyan state despite all the training." Kuroka nodded, her tail swaying gently behind her. "I suspected as much. Your energy has been conflicted, divided, like you've been trying to force 2 different selves to coexist instead of allowing them to become something new." The assessment paralleled his mother's observations with remarkable accuracy. She said something similar, that I'm still holding back parts of myself, trying to be what I was instead of fully becoming what I am. "Smart woman," Kuroka commented with genuine respect. "Most beings never understand that true transformation isn't about becoming something different, it's about becoming more authentically yourself." Our golden eyes reflected the moonlight as she regarded him thoughtfully. "The you I met before was defined by others, the Grimoire girl's pawn, the perverted schoolboy, the aspiring harem king. Roles and masks that never quite fit what was beneath." Issei couldn't deny the accuracy of her assessment. His previous identity had indeed been largely constructed around external expectations and superficie desires, a collection of performances rather than authentic expression. "And now," he asked quietly, "now you're discovering what's always been there, Kuroka replied with unusual gentleness. The warrior beneath the student. The protector beneath the pervert. The leader beneath the follower. She smiled, a genuine expression rather than her typical teasing grin. It's why I've stayed, you know. Not just because of the interdimensional crisis or your admittedly impressive physique. But because watching someone discover their true nature is compelling. The unexpected sincerity created, a moment of connection that transcended their previous interactions, a glimpse of the person beneath Kuroka's carefully maintained facade of playful seduction and casual detachment. Before Issei could respond, the tranquil night was shattered by a sudden surge of energy, a distortion in the atmosphere above the property that pulsed with unmistakable power. Both warriors were on their feet instantly, senses extended toward the disturbance. That's not possible, Kuroka whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. She can't be here already. Vados said we had hours still. But the energy signature was unmistakable, pure Saiyan ki. Magnitudes more concentrated than Issei's hybrid signature, tearing through dimensional boundaries with raw force rather than precise calculation. The approaching visitor had somehow accelerated their transit dramatically, arriving far ahead of predictions. Vados and Rosweiss emerged from the main building, alerted by the energy disturbance. The celestial attendant's expression showed rare surprise as she analyzed the rapidly forming dimensional rift. The visitor has employed an unstable acceleration technique, she observed, staff raised defensively. Dimensio. Null barriers are being forced rather than navigated. Highly dangerous and unpredictable. Can we contain the entry point? Rosweiss asked urgently, already activating runic arrays designed to stabilize dimensional breaches. Partially, Vados confirmed, adding her own power to the containment effort. However, the approach vector has shifted from our calculated intercept zone. Impact imminent. Approximately 3 kilometers southeast. Issei processed this information instantly, recognizing the implications. That's directly over Kuo town. He realized with alarm, if a dimensional rift that size opens above the city, he didn't need to complete the scenario. An uncontrolled dimensional breach above a populated area could cause catastrophic damage, regardless of the visitor's intentions. Without hesitation, Issei channeled ki through his system, golden aura flaring around him as he launched himself skyward. All intercept and redirect, he called back to the others. Try to establish containment perimeters around the town. Issei. Wait, Vados called after him. Your current power level is insufficient too. But he was already accelerating away, pushing his ki propulsion to maximum velocity as he streaked toward the forming dimensional rift. Behind him, he sensed Kuroka following at her top speed, while Vados and Rosweiss began implementing containment measures from the ground. As he approached Kuo town, the dimensional distortion became visible even to normal human perception, a swirling vortex of energy forming approximately 500 meters above the city center. Crackling with violent discharges that illuminated the pre-dawn sky like unnatural lightning. Citizens were already emerging from buildings, pointing upward at the phenomenon with confusion and fear. Emergency vehicle sirens wailed in the distance, responding to what authorities would likely classify as an unprecedented weather anomaly. Issei pushed himself faster, reaching the area directly beneath the forming rift. Its energy signature pulsed with wild fluctuations, signs of an unstable transit that could collapse catastrophically upon completion. If that happened with the visitor still inside, the resulting energy discharge would devastate everything within a kilometer radius. Ddraig, he called mentally to his partner. I need the boosted gears amplification. Maximum output. Be cautious, partner. The dragon responded as the familiar gauntlet materialized around Issei's arm. The energy signature approaching is unlike anything I've encountered in this dimension. Combining our power with your unstable Saiyan abilities could have unpredictable results. We don't have a choice, Issei replied grimly. Either we stabilize that rift or half the town gets wiped out. Boost, 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 boost. The sacred gears announcement echoed as power surged through Issei's system, multiplying his base capabilities exponentially. Crimson draconic energy interwove with golden Saiyan ki, creating the hybrid aura that had become his signature. Positioning himself directly beneath the wildly fluctuating rift, Issei extended both hands upward, channeling his combine D-energy into a stabilization field, a technique Vados had taught him for containing dimensional distortions, though never at this scale. The effort was immediately taxing, straining his control as Rift's chaotic energies fought against his containment. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he poured more power into the field, forcing the dimensional tear to stabilize rather than collapse. "Need some help," came Kuroka's voice as she materialized beside him, her own energy already flowing into supportive patterns around his containment field. "Your form needs work, but the concept is sound." Despite the dire situation, Issei managed a strained smile. Criticism noted. "Let's save the town first, then you can lecture me on technique." Together, they established a more comprehensive containment barrier around the rift, preventing further expansion while allowing for the transit to complete without catastrophic collapse. Kuroka's space-time manipulation abilities proved particularly effective in reinforcing weak points in the dimensional boundary. Just as the containment field stabilized, the rift's center pulsed with blinding intensity. A figure emerged at tremendous velocity, trailing golden energy that resembled a comet's tail as they shot through the opening and into Earth's atmosphere. The dimensional rift collapsed behind them with a thunderous implosion that their containment field successfully channeled upward rather than outward, sparing the town below from devastating shockwaves. "Incoming," Kuroka warned as the figure rocketed toward them with no signs of deceleration. Issei barely had time to reinforce his defensive aura before the visitor collided with him at full velocity, an impact that would have killed an ordinary human instantly and seriously injured even a high-class devil. Only his Saiyan durability, enhanced by the boosted gear's amplification, prevented critical damage. The collision sent both of them hurtling toward the ground below. Issei nagged to stabilize their descent just enough to redirect their impact trajectory away from populated areas, crashing instead into an empty construction site at the town's edge. The impact crater stretched 20 meters across, dust and debris billowing upward as Issei struggled to regain his bearings. His enhanced durability had protected him from the worst effects, but the collision had still left him momentarily disoriented. As the dust began to settle, he became aware of a weight pinning him to the crater's center, his unexpected visitor, who had somehow maintained consciousness despite the tremendous impact. Focusing his vision through the clearing debris, Issei found himself staring into fierce black eyes set in a feminine face framed by wild, spiky black hair. The woman, clearly the Saiyan they'd been expecting, wore battle-damaged armor of unfamiliar design over a form-fitting bodysuit that left her arms bare, revealing defined musculature that spoke of intensive combat training. A Saiyan tail, brown and furry, wrapped reflexively around her waist in what Issei recognized as a defensive posture. For several heartbeats, they simply stared at each other, two beings of Saiyan heritage meeting for the first time under circumstances neither had anticipated. Then the woman's eyes narrowed, her expression shifting from momentary confusion to focused intensity. "Found you," she declared in accented Japanese, her voice carrying the unmistakable confidence of a warrior accustomed to challenging situations. "You're the one broadcasting Saiyan energy signatures across dimensions. The hybrid." Before Issei could respond, she pressed a forearm against his throat, not choking him, but establishing dominance in the unmistakable language of combat. "I am Caulifla, elite warrior of the Sadala Defense Forces. And you," her eyes traveled over him with critical assessment, "are going to explain exactly how Saiyan blood ended up in this backwater dimension." The directness of the demand, delivered without preamble or diplomacy, struck Issei as quintessentially Saiyan based on everything Vados had taught him about the warrior race's typically straightforward approach. "I'd be happy to," he managed, meeting her intense gaze without flinching, "if you'd stop using my windpipe as an armrest." Something like reluctant amusement flickered in Caulifla's eyes before she removed her arm. Though she maintained her position straddling him in the impact crater, clearly unwilling to surrender tactical advantage. "Talk fast," she commanded, energy crackling around her fists in clear warning. Starting with how a hybrid with diluted blood can generate power readings that penetrate dimensional boundaries. Before Issei could form a response, a new voice interrupted from the crater's edge. Perhaps this conversation would be more productive in a less public setting. Vados stood at the rim, staff in hand, regarding the scene with her typical composed assessment. Beside her, Kuroka and Rosweiss maintained defensive postures, clearly prepared to intervene if the situation deteriorated. Caulifla's head snapped up, her attention immediately shifting to the newcomers, particularly Vados. whose nature even a visitor from another dimension could clearly recognize as extraordinary. "Who are you?" Caulifla demanded, instantly on her feet in a defensive stance that eyed her protectively near Issei rather than threatening him, an instinctive shift that didn't escape his notice. "You're not from this world. Not from any world connected to Sadala. I am Vados, attendant to Lord Champa, god of destruction of Universe 6, came the calm introduction. The same universe from which you originate, though perhaps from a different temporal alignment." The formal identification clearly meant something to Caulifla, whose aggressive posture faltered momentarily before she reasserted her warrior's composure. "Impossible," she stated flatly. "Lord Champa's attendant is accounted for in my dimension. This is some kind of deception. Multiversal convergence creates parallel iterations across dimensional boundaries," Vados explained with patient precision. "The dimensional instabilities that allowed you to detect Issei's energy signature are the same phenomena creating overlapping versions of established cosmic hierarchies." While this exchange continued, Issei rose to his feet. Assessing his condition, the impact had been substantial but not debilitating. His training with Vados had conditioned his body to withstand far greater punishment than he would have thought possible weeks earlier. More concerning was the gathering crowd at the safe perimeter local authorities had established around the impact site. Smartphones recorded the confrontation, emergency vehicles. Lights flashed in the early dawn light, and the unmistakable sensation of multiple supernatural entities approaching suggested the commotion had attracted attention from various factions. "We need to leave," he stated firmly, addressing both Caulifla and Vados. "This location is too exposed, and we're drawing exactly the kind of attention we've been trying to avoid." To his surprise, Caulifla nodded in brisk agreement, her tactical assessment apparently aligning with his despite their tense introduction. "Fine, lead the way to your secure location." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "But this conversation isn't over." "Hybrid, wouldn't dream of it," Issei replied dryly. "And the name's Issei Hyodo." Something unreadable flickered across Caulifla's features at the introduction, recognition, perhaps. Or some other reaction to his name specifically. Before he could analyze it further, Vados created a transportation circle around their group. "Dimensional transit activating," she announced. "Destination: Mountain Sanctuary." As the transportation magic enveloped them, Issei caught a glimpse of familiar crimson hair at the crowd's edge, Rias Grimori, accompanied by several members of the Occult Research Club, watching with expressions ranging from surprise to concern to something that might have been regret. Then reality shifted, depositing their group safely within the mountain property's central courtyard. The moment they materialized, Caulifla took 3 rapid steps away from the others, establishing defensive space as she assessed her new surroundings. With a warrior's practiced efficiency. "Nice setup," she commented grudgingly, noting the energy containment fields and defensive perimeters Vados and the others had established. "Military-grade barrier techniques. Someone knows what they're doing." "Thank you," Rossweiss replied with professional pride, having contributed significantly to the defensive arrangements. The runic configurations are adapted from Asgardian containment protocols. Caulifla's attention shifted to the Valkyrie, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're not Saiyan, not with that energy signature. Why involve yourself in Saiyan business?" "I serve as observer for the Norse pantheon," Rossweiss explained formally. "Interdimensional incursions of this magnitude fall under our monitoring protocols." Before Caulifla could respond, Kuroka stepped forward, her typical playfulness replaced by unusual seriousness. "Before this turns into a bureaucratic discussion of interdimensional protocols, perhaps our visitor would like to explain why she tore through dimensional barriers like they were tissue paper, nearly causing a catastrophic collapse over a populated area." The direct challenge caused Caulifla's energy to flare defensively, golden key crackling around her form as she responded to the perceived threat. Issei moved instinctively between them, hands raised in a calming gesture toward both powerful females. "Let's all take a step back," he suggested, surprising himself with the natural authority in his voice. Caulifla just arrived after what was clearly a difficult dimensional transit. "Maybe we start with offering food and basic hospitality before the interrogations begin." The suggestion, recognizing both Saiyan metabolic needs after energy expenditure and basic diplomatic courtesy, seemed to catch Caulifla off guard. Her aggressive posture relaxed marginally, though suspicion remained evident in her expression. Food would be acceptable, she acknowledged stiffly. Dimensional travel depletes energy reserves. Vados nodded approvingly at Issei's approach. A suitable suggestion. Please follow me to the main hall. Refreshments have been prepared in anticipation of our visitor's arrival, though admittedly, we expected more advance notice. The subtle criticism in her final comment drew a defiant lift of Caulifla's chin. Standard transit protocols were taking too long. I modified THE approach vector using experimental technology. Effective, if slightly imprecise. Slightly imprecise. Nearly wiped out half a city, Kuroka muttered, though quietly enough that only those with enhanced hearing would detect it. As they moved toward the main building, Issei found himself studying their unexpected visitor more carefully. Caulifla moved with the confident grace of a lifetime warrior. Every gesture economical yet fluid. Her power level was indeed impressive, far beyond what he could currently generate, though perhaps not as overwhelming as Vados had initially suggested. Most notably, despite her aggressive introduction, she displayed none of the sadistic tendencies or destructive impulses Vados had described as common among Universe 7 Saiyans. Her confrontational approach, seemed driven more by caution and assessment than any desire for dominance or violence for its own sake. Inside the main hall, an impressive spread awaited, foods high in protein and complex carbohydrates that Vados had identified as optimal for Saiyan metabolism. Caulifla approached the offering with visible restraint, clearly torn between hunger and continued wariness. It's not poisoned, Issei offered with a hint of humor as he selected several items for himself. Though even if it was, our Saiyan metabolism would probably neutralize most toxins before they could take effect. The casual demonstration of knowledge about Saiyan physiology seemed to surprise Caulifla. You know about accelerated detoxification. Most hybrids I've encountered barely understand the basics of their heritage. I've had good teachers, Issei replied, glancing toward Vados. And recently learned my family has been preserving Saiyan knowledge for generations, even while hiding their abilities. T's information clearly intrigued Caulifla, who finally relented and began consuming the offered food with typical Saiyan efficiency. As her immediate metabolic needs were addressed, her defensive posture relaxed further, allowing for more productive conversation. So, she began between mouthfuls, addressing Issei directly. You're a hybrid with awakened abilities, carrying the Saiyan genetic marker despite being how many generations removed from pure bloodline? 4, Issei supplied. My great-grandmother was a Saiyan infant who escaped planet Vegeta's destruction. According to family records, she had some connection to the royal bloodline, though distant. Caulifla's eyes widened at this information, food momentarily forgotten. Royal bloodline. You're claiming descent from the house of Vegeta. I'm not claiming anything, Issei clarified. I'm repeating what my family records indicate. I only learned about this heritage recently myself. He retrieved the royal pendant his mother had given him, offering it for Caulifla's inspection. She accepted it with unexpected reverence, examining the symbol embossed on its surface with evident recognition. House Sadala, she murmured, surprise evident in her voice. Not Vegeta. This is the royal insignia from before the schism, when Sadala was still the original Saiyan homeworld. She looked up at Issei with new intensity. Quote, this predates the split between Universe 6 and 7 Saiyans by centuries. Your ancestor wasn't just any Saiyan, she carried lineage from before our histories diverged. The revelation created a momentary silence as its implications settled. Vados, who had been observing the exchange with clinical interest, finally spoke.